Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Temecula City Council meeting. What's today's date? The 8th?
The 9th.
It's the 9th. There you go. Everybody, welcome out there at home. I'm going to call this meeting to order. It's always good to start our meeting with an invocation. Mr. City Manager, would you give us our invocation? And then please remain standing for our flag salute. Why don't Councilmember Ron, would you take care of that? Let's stand.
Would you please stand, bow your head. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, we just come to you this evening to do the business of the city, but we're reminded wherever we look with heavy hearts on the movement that is occurring in our nation, in our state, and in our very own city, Lord. And we're praying for peace. We're praying that voices are heard. We know they are. Lord, I'm thankful and grateful for our men and women on the front line, our police and fire services, Lord, that you're protecting them and as they protect us. And Lord, I just pray for this meeting this evening. Pray for continued peace in our city, peaceful protests. We're grateful. Lord, I pray over the business. I pray over the city council and the city staff and just wisdom and discernment on taking care of this important business of the city. And we glorify you in all that we say and hopefully all that we do. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
All right, please join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please be seated. Madam City Clerk, can you call the roll?
Yes, Councilmember Nagar, I'll go ahead and note that since we are still in a virtual setting tonight, we will still be conducting all actions via roll call vote. And now I will go ahead and conduct the roll. Mayor Pro Tem Edwards. Here. Councilmember Nagar.
Here.
Councilmember Ron.
Here.
Councilmember Schwenk.
And I am here.
At this time, Madam City Clerk, seeing that our Mayor Pro Tem has come into the building, we're at the point where there's public comments. I'm going to turn the meeting over to her.
Thank you, Councilmember Nagar. So do we have any public comments?
Yes, Madam Mayor Pro Tem, we do have several public comments, and as such, I'm going to go ahead and read the rules at this point. A total of 30 minutes is provided for members of the public to address the City Council on items that appear on the consent calendar or a matter not listed on the agenda. Each speaker is limited to 3 minutes. For all public hearing or business items on the agenda, each speaker is limited to 5 minutes. For this meeting, public comments may be submitted and will be read into the record pursuant to the important notice provided at the top of the agenda. So we actually have almost 50 or so public comments.
All right.
And the first speaker, I'll just go ahead and call the names as I have in the past, read their comments, and then go to the next person who has commented.
Okay.
So for the first one, it will be Sarah Payton. Actually, I apologize. It will actually be Christina Ruiz. And Christina writes, "We have hundreds of upset children and parents who just want to finish our Little League season. As of now, we will be canceling the season on the 13th if the fields don't open. The children have already had to go through so much during this time and love playing this sport. Let them have something. We drive past bars, restaurants that are packed with people that have no social distance, and our kids aren't able to throw a ball from 8 feet apart. Temecula hasn't been harshly affected by COVID, and the kids should get to finish the season. The fields are plenty big for the families to social distance. There is absolutely no reason to not let them play. Please reopen the fields and let us finish our games and season. Please care a little bit about the kids and not just businesses. They're affected too." The next speaker is Jessica Ward. My name is Jessica Ward, and I am a longtime board member of Temecula Little League. I am reaching out to ask that the City Council discuss and approve reopening of athletic fields for youth sports usage. We are excited to see that professional sports are able to continue on Friday, June 12th, though there was no mention of youth sports. We have reached out to the State Essential Services Department, and they confirmed that youth sports fall within Stage 3. However, the state has failed to provide any guidelines. Today, we also asked Riverside County to approve the usage of athletic fields for youth sports such as baseball, which is an extremely low-contact sport. If I can go into a bar surrounded by people, our children should be able to play a baseball game in the park. The skate park and pump track are open and being used daily by a large number of people safely, so we are asking to be given the opportunity to do the same for athletic fields. While we understand opening up athletic fields is low on the priority level at this time, because there are a ton of businesses around our city that are still closed, we didn't want youth sports to fall by the wayside, as it is an integral part of our children's lives. We know this will be a great outlet for kids who have been stuck inside for weeks with no ability to fully practice their athletic hobbies. Our current plan is to space out players in the dugout and bullpens, hand sanitizer stations in every dugout, wipe down the balls between each half inning, and recommend our players perform temperature checks before each practice and game. All of these things, while different than normal play, will allow our coaches, players, families to conform to the state health guidelines while participating in something that is good for their mental and physical health. We appreciate your time and consideration of these requests. The next speaker is Eva Smith. And Eva writes, I am writing to you as a concerned Temecula resident of over 20 years. On Saturday, May 30th, we witnessed an enormous number of police presence at the peaceful protest. You can locate multiple videos on Twitter under the hashtag Temecula protests. The peaceful protest was organized by high school students in the Temecula area. Were you aware that there were families at the protest? Were you aware that there were children at the protest? Were you aware there were moms, dads, and kids in strollers at the protest? The city put a lot of innocent people at risk with the unnecessary show of force. I saw parents clutching their children in their arms. I saw a teen frozen in fear of what the police was going to do next. At no point did it become an unlawful assembly. At no point was anyone involved in destruction. The force wasn't just strong, it was an overkill. You stopped all the parents in their tracks, and everyone started recording in disbelief that the police was going to do next. Why was this amount of police presence necessary? Where is the civility, compassion, empathy, and unity that our community needs at this time from its leadership? This is not the Temecula that we have grown fond of and love. As a registered voter and active member of my community, I am concerned about the direction the city of Temecula is headed. The next speaker is Gia Reda. I used to be that cop that responded, all lives matter, but I now know better. If I told you I battled breast cancer in 2019 and that breast cancer research is important, would you assert, no, pancreatic cancer research is important? No, you wouldn't. When someone is trying to convey strongly held feelings, we don't actively try to negate their personal experiences, and it is the same with our current civil unrest. On May 30th, 2020, at the Temecula Duck Pond, a Riverside County Sheriff's deputy was having a polite discussion with a group of protesters. During this discussion, he asserted all lives matter. I know he meant well, and I understand the intent of his response. The comment is truthful standing alone, but when it is said in response to Black Lives Matter, the statement is racially charged and insensitive. To say Black Lives Matter does not mean other lives don't matter. It is a statement that social injustice is not okay. It is not the time to say, well, white people need social justice too. White people have been on the winning end of social inequality for centuries. I respectfully request that all Temecula City employees, but most specifically deputies and their supervisors assigned to the Temecula Police Department, undergo sensitivity training, presumably as a part of their ongoing civil rights, diversity, and inclusion training. The goal of the training would be to understand historically the centuries-old struggle fueling the anger behind the Black Lives Matter movement, learn to actively listen instead of giving a visceral response, to understand what white privilege is not an insult. It's a simple state of being, that life will not be made more difficult simply due to the color of your skin. to understand the insulting and counterproductive nature of the flippant retort, "All lives matter," to agree with the speaker, or at a minimum to remain respectfully silent when they hear Black Lives Matter. I would also recommend that the training include or to be led by persons of color, a community representative who wants to effect change by working in partnership with the police. Ms. Denise Y. Denson Haynes has volunteered to lead this training. I used to be that cop that responded, "All lives matter," but now I know better. I want to share this truth with you. I can emphatically say, without reservation, without preamble, without apology, without alteration, Black Lives Matter. Our country is on the verge of change, and it's being led by kids like our Temecula youth. I am hopeful that the city of Temecula can actively listen to the outpouring of frustration from our community and help escort our city into a new era of equality. The next speaker is Israel Mazarregos. I have been a resident of Riverside County for just about 4 years. Before that, I lived in a small town called Moore Park in Ventura County. As the years have gone by, my interest in politics and social justice has only grown. Although the world is filled with many joys and immense beauty, it is also filled with pain, unrest, atrocities, and we must not shy away from. I am merely a 23-year-old Hispanic American man. Racial slurs and prejudice towards me have come few and far between. I am blessed to have grown up in communities I did, but there are thousands of others who cannot say the same. The current outcry of the Black Lives Matter movement is one of many years. I write this letter to you asking for guidance during this historical time. History is being written whether you or I get involved. I ask for your help, for a direction I should be going. I live in Murrieta, Lake Elsinore, Menifee, Hemet, and Temecula are my neighboring cities. What can I become involved in? Who are local officials I can meet? Who can I discuss these and future issues with? Where do I volunteer? There is a regular meeting every second and fourth Tuesday of every month in the City Council chambers. Is this open to the public? I would love to attend. The next speaker is Savannah McLaughlin. I am a resident of Temecula, and I am getting in touch because I am deeply troubled by what I have seen recently of the treatment of Black Americans by police and police departments nationwide. I would like to know what kinds of safeguards our own town's police department has in place to prevent police brutality and incidents of racism by police. Does Temecula PD perform any kind of anti-racism training for its officers? Are Temecula PD officers required to wear body cameras to record their responses to calls on video? Does Temecula PD train its officers in de-escalation? Are new recruits screened in any way to prevent the hiring of racists, for instance, by looking at social media posts? How does Internal Affairs investigate and respond to reports of discrimination by officers? If these safeguards are not in place, and they certainly should be, I would support my local taxes paying to fund these interventions. Additional tangible policy recommendations can be found here, and there is a link. Thank you for your attention to my concerns. These are very literal matters of life and death, and I hope to hear back from you soon. The next speaker is Saman Arzo. My name is Saman Arzo, and I am a resident of Temecula, California. I am writing to demand the following legislative changes you can make to eradicate the decimation of Black people at the hands of police officers. The following is a compilation of background information and implementation strategies for necessary legislative actions derived from collecting the pleas of Black organizers, activists, and journalists. Number 1, redirect police funding. More training or diversity among police officers won't end police brutality, nor will firing and charging individual officers. Look at the Minneapolis Police Department, which is held up as a model of progressive police reform. The department offers procedural justice as well as trainings for implicit bias, mindfulness, and de-escalation. It embraces community policing and officer diversity and bans warrior-style policing, uses body cams, implemented an early intervention system to identify problematic officers, receives training around mental health crisis intervention, and practices reconciliation efforts in communities of color. Evidently, that was not enough. Instead of heightening the resources that officers have, they advocate redirecting funds to alternative emergency response programs, which can also be fueled by state level and local level grants. The argument is that we should work towards a reality in which healthcare workers and emergency response teams should handle substance abuse, domestic violence, homelessness, or mental health cases, while rapid response social workers provide individuals with the care that they need. Community organizers would be responsible for spearheading responses to the pandemic. The average police recruit spends 58 hours learning how to shoot and only 8 hours learning how to de-escalate. Police officers are not trained nor necessary in reacting to such crises. Specialized responders are. Most police funding is budgeted and taxed at the local level, with city level and county level votes periodically increasing budgets. In 2017, Oakland allocated the highest share of its general fund to policing nationwide at 41% at $242.5 million. It is crucial to establish state level and local level bans on heightening police funds while simultaneously redirecting budgets to the aforementioned alternatives. For-profit policing is a large culprit. Even though Governor Brown's 2016 bill helped protect Californians from civil assets forfeiture, this is far from sufficient. As of 2020, 66.25% of forfeiture profits go to police, a C+ rating. The Black Lives Matter movement demands acknowledgement and accountability for the devaluation and dehumanization of Black lives at the hands of the police. We call for a national defunding of police. We demand investment in our communities and the resources to ensure Black people not only survive but thrive. The McHarris conclusion states, and that's the 3 minutes. The next speaker is Alan Kuki. I would like to see a message from the mayor and city council members on the Temecula government website explaining police training and police discipline procedures. In light of what has happened in Minneapolis recently, as well as evidence of systemic racism nationwide, what improvements can be made to assure police will do their duty without racial profiling or discrimination? I don't want to hear that no changes need to be made because everything is working just fine in Temecula. I want to know what new additional training and discipline procedures will be enacted now. Hopefully this training will not be needed for most officers, but just to be safe, it's time to double down to root out any conscious or unconscious racism in our police. I'm a white retired senior and Temecula homeowner since 1994. I recall an incident back some 10 or more years ago when I called the police to report a suspicious activity in my Temecula neighborhood. The first thing the policeman asked me over the phone was, "Is he Black?" When I said no, I was surprised to sense an immediate loss of interest in the seriousness of my call. I remember at the time thinking, this cop is racist. The next speaker is Amber Sosa. My name is Amber Sosa and I am a resident of Temecula. I am writing to demand the following legislative changes you can make to eradicate the decimation of Black people at the hands of police officers. The following is a compilation of background information and implementation strategies necessary for legislative actions derived from collecting the pleas of Black organizers, activists, journalists. I'm actually going to read the second portion of this because the first portion mirrors the email I just read 2 emails ago. Number 2, abolish legislative police protections. Murderers who wear a badge have consistently been given a free pass to decimate Black life. BLM demands accountability for those who are victims of police violence. It is vital to ensure that police officers are met with precisely the same consequences as their badgeless counterparts. Accountability has been denied to Black people for centuries, and it is crucial to impose legislative confirmation that accountability is ensured. Campaign Zero is an organization dedicated to limiting police interventions, improving community interactions, and ensuring accountability. They propose a solution of independent investigations because only 1% of all killings by police lead to an officer being charged with the crime. Independent investigations and prosecutions of police officers must be mandated to eliminate biases. A broken system should not be evaluating itself. Number 3, demilitarize the police. Campaign Zero emphasizes that studies show how more militarized police departments are significantly more likely to kill civilians. Unfortunately, the federal 1033 program transfers military weapons to police departments. Campaign Zero continues that to demilitarize, we must prohibit cities and counties from using federal funds to purchase military equipment. California is not void of this indictment. In total, 41 MRAPs are in the possession of law enforcement agencies in California. All in all, California's quantity of purchasing such outlandish and high-level military technology is unmatched. In terms of cash value, California gets more than 1033 gear than other states. Even though the LAPD has refused to take on more military equipment, they stated that the department will replenish and replace existing equipment. Such measures must be barred in an effort to eventually demilitarize the police force entirely in the long run. Police departments should be restricted from using federal grant money to purchase military equipment, using the SWAT team, or conducting no-knock raids. Over-weaponized departments must reduce their use of weapon stockpiles, as agencies should seek to return to the federal government the military equipment that has already been received, as places like San Jose have already done. The warranting is simple. And that's just about 3 minutes right there. The next speaker is Ricky Denham. I am a resident of Temecula, and I am getting in touch because I am deeply troubled by what I have seen recently of the treatment of Black Americans by police and police departments nationwide. I would like to know what kinds of safeguards our town's police department has in place to prevent police brutality and incidents of racism by police. Does Temecula PD perform any kind of anti-racism training for officers? Are Temecula PD officers required to wear body cameras to record their responses to calls on video? Does Temecula PD train its officers in de-escalation? Are new recruits screened in any way to prevent the hiring of racists, for instance, by looking at social media posts? How does Internal Affairs investigate and respond to reports of discrimination by officers? Do Black Lives Matter to you? If these safeguards are not in place, and they certainly should be, I would support my local taxes paying to fund these interventions. Additional tangible policy recommendations can be found here, and there is a link for Campaign Zero. Thank you for your attention to my concerns. These are very literally matters of life and death, and I hope to hear back from you soon. Next speaker is Alyssa Garcia. My name is Alyssa Garcia, and I am a 25-year resident of Temecula, California. Today I am writing to you in an attempt to understand how my own local government is planning on protecting its members of color from racial injustice. In light of recent events, it is clear that there is no longer an if when it comes to the presence of racial bias in the police force and local governments. I urge you to understand that although racism by police officers and officials is not always recorded in our community, it does exist. Please take the time to speak and listen to the Black residents that you vow to serve and protect, and they will tell you that they experience racial discrimination every day. You are in a great position of power, and with that comes the responsibility to do everything you can to protect people of all races, ethnicities, and walks of life. I am ultimately writing to you today to ask what you specifically are doing to ensure that lives like that of George Floyd are no longer taken by the hand or knee of the corrupt. The Minnesota Department of Human Rights is currently doing an in-depth investigation of the Minneapolis Police Department over the course of the past 10 years. What is California legislation doing to hold our own police departments accountable? Are the police who are being dispatched to local protests wearing functioning body cameras? Perhaps review of these videos are a good place to start. Lastly, I would like to thank you, the political leaders and police officers who are genuinely doing their part to create safety and peace in an overwhelming time of crisis. In this time, I urge you to really empathize with those who are crying out for their governments to show that every life has value. There are currently 2 deadly diseases taking the lives of thousands every day, COVID-19 and racism. Perhaps if our government treated both as such, we would still not be in this position. The next speaker is Rainer Rosales. I'm writing in regards to the happenings of the peaceful protests at the Duck Pond on May 30th. I was there from approximately 3 p.m. to 5:45 p.m., and what I saw was a prime example of why these sorts of protests need to happen. While I understand that some individuals did cross into illegal territory when they began to protest in the street, the vast majority stayed within the permitted territory, including myself. The county's officers came in with the goal of showing strength and decided before those incidents started that they were going to make a show of those protesting. They decided that that group, composed of predominantly teens and young adults, were thugs that needed to be policed and herded. It felt like officers wanted to intimidate protesters instead of protecting and serving them. As a transgender queer Chicano, I don't feel safe when the MAGA folks have their rallies at the duck pond. I don't see the county sending in officers to intimidate those folks, but they had no problem sending numerous officers there when we were peacefully protesting injustice. Who is Riverside County really protecting? The city of Temecula needs to speak out about this, about the blatant injustice that is the policing in our county and our country. The first step needs to be calling out the problematic approach the officers took on May 30th. You want the people of Temecula to respect the police presence, then make the police presence respectable. If you have any questions about my experience, please feel free to reach out to me. The next speaker is Judy Torres. I urge you to support and pledge to establish the foundation for policing policy that will eliminate the crime of police murder and brutality against people of color and the rest of society. Institute the principles in the 21st century policing as outlined in Obama.org. Join city government across the nation to make police work effective and morally correct, to end crimes by police and keep the public safe. Pledge to implement 21st policing. Prevent other persons of color suffering and death due to brutal police abuse. This problem of extreme police abuse can occur in the future. In Temecula, I implore you to act now. The next speaker is Carly Shepard. My name is Carly Shepard, and I am a concerned citizen of Temecula who believes that James Stewart should resign as mayor. Tonight, I came across a screenshot of an email shared between another constituent and Stewart on social media, see attached, and was disappointed in the city government as a whole. Within the message, Stewart states, "I don't believe there's ever been a good person of color killed by a police officer." An ignorant, short-sighted comment that suggests extrajudicial killings of people of color are justified based on their skin color and the white perception of African Americans as dangerous. People of color are people too. However, it seems that James Stewart doesn't understand this given the callous, unthinking comments he made. Furthermore, Stewart's rhetoric effectively criminalizes George Floyd, Sandra Bland, Trayvon Martin, and the long list of other African Americans who've been brutally murdered by the police. Not only does this statement directly contradict Stewart's comment that racism is not expected or tolerated in the city of Temecula, but it alienates a large swath of the population. Given the protests spreading across all 50 states and several countries, including France, Germany, and South Korea, these comments are insensitive at best and carry tones of white supremacy at worst. I am deeply disappointed with the city government and will be taking further action to make this exchange known by all. Therefore, I am formally calling for the resignation of James Stewart as mayor of Temecula, effective immediately. The next speaker is Victoria Serrano. My family and friends and I have seen your email reply to a concerned family in regards to what you and your team is doing to end police brutality in our community. Your response was ignorant and undeniably uneducated. You obviously don't know anything about what happens in your city, since you're unaware of an innocent black man being beaten by police officers here in Temecula. An officer instigating violence at last week's first BLM protest and racist high school students that will grow up to be those same authorities. Saying, quote, "I have African American friends," proves nothing other than show how absolutely ignorant you are to racism in America. Do better, educate yourself, because we can vote you out. The next speaker is Ginger Hitsky. I am writing to you today to ask that you consider making police reform in Temecula a priority in 2020. I want to know what you plan to do to prevent a murder by a police officer like so many that have occurred in our lifetime. The next speaker is Sarah Valota. I am a resident of Hemet, California. I would like to voice how utterly disgusted with the city of Temecula and the mayor. As an educator to children of all races, I would like to say that by the mayor stating, "And I don't believe there's ever been a good person of color killed by a police officer," this is allowing all children and adults of color to believe that your mayor has qualifications for which people of color should be brutally murdered by police. You should be ashamed that this is the face of your city. I do hope you consider the feelings and safety of the brown and black folks in your community. Please reconsider who you choose to represent that city of Temecula. Next speaker is Abram Serta. and he actually wrote twice, so, the mayor of Temecula, on June 3rd, posted the email below and an apology for what is an egregiously racist response to a citizen's request for information on the city of Temecula's response to national demand for reform to address police brutality on a local level. These actions and this inappropriate response from the mayor merit a review of his position in power for the city. Stating you don't know if anyone in Temecula has had issues with police brutality is not an appropriate response to addressing the national conversation and movement for reform with the residents of the city you were elected to govern. Do better. This is not okay. And coming onto a Facebook group to save face for a lackluster response mentioning your African American friends is absolutely inappropriate and demonstrates what real disregard and lack of care you have for these issues. Some action items for the mayor: issue an apology, do research on these issues, and acknowledge that systemic racism and police brutality exists and the need for reform and consequence, and hold a virtual town hall where you listen to Temecula residents' concerns. He also wrote, I am born and raised in Temecula. This complaint is with regards to email and Facebook apology from the mayor that I have attached the email thread to. I am sure you have all read the articles from the Press Enterprise posted just hours ago as well, which addresses his racist email. In my time living here, I have witnessed countless anti-Black racism against Black folks by the Riverside County Sheriff's Department, as well as by private security across the city. Again, being a non-Black person myself, you really need to hold space for Black residents to come forward with their experiences. Your negligence to do so at this time contributes to the cycles of systemic racism. Action for the City Council. Can you please respond with regards to hosting a virtual town hall meeting and issue a statement that addresses the mayor's egregious racist comment, repercussions for his actions? This is arguably an ethics violation, and addressing reform for the Riverside County Sheriff's Department presence in Temecula. Before you jump on board and echo the mayor's denial of racism or police brutality being experienced by folks in your community, please host a town hall where you actually listen to Black folks in our community. And there is a link that is also provided. The next speaker is Mia Michael. I am a constituent raised in Menifee, and I am calling on you to denounce Temecula Mayor James Stewart's recent words and actions. When asked about police brutality by his constituent, he responded with a poorly written paragraph, including word-for-word statements like, I don't believe there's ever been a good person of color killed by a police officer. I'm kind of confused what you're looking for, and racism is not tolerated or accepted in the city of Temecula or any surrounding areas I know for sure. Now let's break down each of these statements. For the first statement, he later claimed, only after being publicly held accountable, that he did not mean to say good and that it was a simple typo. However, there are many holes in this statement. First, he made that claim after this email became public and he began receiving backlash. It truly seems to be a lazy excuse, as he did not say this privately to the person he was conversing with once he realized his mistake. Second, the content of the entire email aligns with that perspective. In addition, if this claim about it being a typo is true, that means the mayor of the city would recklessly send out an email in response to a serious question of police brutality and murder without care, without proofreading, and without truly answering any questions, and instead deflecting responsibility to others. This is not how any public official should act. He claims no people of color have been killed by police in Temecula, but Matthew Tucker was murdered on May 4th, 2016, after he called the police for suicide intervention. The fact that the mayor of this city had no idea of this young man's tragic death is disgusting. Moreover, on May 30th, a peaceful protest in Temecula was deemed an unlawful gathering, and 6 people were arrested for practicing their First Amendment right. It's clear through his actions that he does not care for his people he is supposed to represent. For the second statement, the original email sent to the mayor was quite clear as to what they wanted. We want public officials who don't hide behind excuses and claim that it's someone else's job to govern and care for their city. Yes, Temecula and the surrounding area is policed by the Riverside County Police, but as mayor, you still have the power and capability to make change. We constituents want elected officials who do everything in their power to stop unjust murder, even though you might not have full and autonomous control of the police. You still can make statements, call for action, educate people, and denounce police brutality. This is not a controversial topic anymore, as all 50 states have had protests, and so have many other countries. We are asking on you and all other officials to use your platform for good. Lastly, he claims that surrounding areas are not racist. This is where you come into play. If this statement is truthful, then you will do everything in your power to put a stop to this. In case you don't know how to start with that, here are a few ideas. Denounce the mayor's bigoted words. This is by far the easiest action you could take to support your Black constituents. Educate yourself about this issue. That's 3 minutes. The next speaker is Annabelle Fletcher. I am writing with concern regarding Mayor Stewart's recent comments about police violence in Riverside County. My name is Annabelle Fletcher, and I have been living in Temecula for 3.5 years. While blaming voice to text and lack of proofreading for the statement, I don't believe there's ever been a good person of color killed by a police officer. The rest of the email reads as tone deaf and divisive. While important conversations and dialogues are happening all across our nation, the mayor sends a half-hearted email about a heavy subject without proofreading it when corresponding with people he is supposed to represent. The response posted on My Valley News is even more appalling, saying that someone just literally did it to bait me and set me up. We are your constituents, and just because our concerns don't go along with your narrative doesn't mean that we are baiting. The original email was supposedly about sensitivity training for the Riverside Police Department, but I asked the city council to educate and get sensitivity training for themselves. Mayor Stewart claims he is not a racist, but this type of defensiveness, instead of listening to your city's citizens, shows that there is work to be done. I humbly ask City Council to please take a good look at what's happening around the nation and to examine the systemic problems at play and ensure that our citizens from the beautiful city of Temecula don't suffer from any injustices. The next speaker is Delaney Pack. Thank you for allowing me to have the opportunity to share my experience at one of the Temecula Duck Pond protests. I was born in Fallbrook and raised in Temecula. When I heard about the protests happening, to be honest, I was both proud and surprised that my hometown was holding a peaceful protest about social inequities and police brutality with a large turnout. I arrived at about 3 p.m. When I got there, by then it was definitely intense. When I saw how many police officers were there in riot gear, it was frightening, honestly. I couldn't understand why that was necessary, but I was able to join the protest, and I was near the front for the entire 2 hours I was there. You all see the huge protests and how wild it gets in major cities. This was not Temecula. We were a very small group, very contained, but we were all forced back inside the fences of the duck pond. There were a few protesters that were louder than others for sure, using their right to express themselves with their opinions on oppression and racism. About an hour into my time there, Riverside sheriffs put on their gas masks. I could not understand why, since at the moment the group was very peaceful but vocal. We all understood that they were trying to intimidate us, but why? Why were they inciting violence against a crowd like that, considering the majority of protesters were high schoolers and young adults? I am 23. The 2 people beside me were in high school. These are your children. We know your children. Since the protest, I have been online talking about it, and along with a lot of support, there are residents that have promoted and threatened to bring their own guns and shooting these protesters. I have attached screenshots of these threats. There was no attachment to this email. The Sheriff's Department said the protest was an unlawful gathering and threatened arrests and tear gas, and a day later, Sheriff Bianco posted on social media that it was a peaceful gathering. Well, which is it? If either of those scenarios was the case, the fact that Riverside sheriffs had tear gas and rubber bullets ready to go at any point was patently unnecessary. I ask you, please protect your protesters, your children, your citizens from this terrorism, and actively do something about these threats instead of ignoring them. Turning a human rights issue into a political issue is just totally wrong. Temecula needs to own up to its faults, as well as its great qualities, and protect every citizen's rights. Okay, the next 5 speakers actually have the exact same email. So I will go ahead and read the email once, and I will read the names of the individuals that submitted the email. First, the email. I am a resident of Temecula, and I am emailing to demand the restructuring of our city budget so as to prioritize more social services for our community and to drastically minimize spending on police. It is unconscionable that 1/3 to 1/2 of the city's budget is going to the police department. This does not align with the values that I have as your constituent, and I demand that you and other city officials work together to draft and approve a budget that diverts funds from the police department and reallocates them directly to benefit those in need. Defunding the police and restructuring the budget is an absolute necessity now more than ever. Police perpetuate a pattern of excessive violence and force, especially directed towards Black people and their communities. The police refuse to hold their own accountable, and this is unacceptable. We are in the middle of a global pandemic that has killed 100,000 Americans, and more than 40 million people have filed for unemployment. Healthcare workers are without proper equipment, and essential workers are not being fairly compensated or protected for the great work that they do. We don't need more police. We need more social safety nets. Funds intended for police would be better off being sorted to initiatives that enrich our public schools and students, provide more affordable housing and mental health care initiatives, protect and bolster our parks, support small businesses struggling due to COVID-19, provide cheaper and cleaner modes of public transportation. Our nation is grieving the deaths of Black Americans that were murdered at the hands of police officers who have yet to be held accountable. While the police department has more funding than it knows what to do with, we have communities who are desperately needing funding, and every day they don't receive it, their quality of life worsens. Thousands have died who did not need to. You have the ability to change this, so do it. Okay, that email is from Mackenzie Orr. The same email was submitted by Emily Kim. The same email was submitted by Gabby Waltz. And the same email was submitted by Mohammed Penjwani. And that same email was also submitted by Nicolo Velazquez. The next speaker is Kirk Lentz. In these chaotic times, I know the talking points are to defund the police. This is not only unreasonable, but dangerous for our community and the recruitment of police. I am neither an activist or a police hater, just very concerned with the tactics and training of all police. However, as a concerned citizen who has no record at all, I have had several run-ins with police who always want to use a militaristic approach to dealing with me, the average citizen. Simply questioning an officer has led to backup being called, even with small children in the car. And I am a white guy. I would like the following to be added and/or discussed at the next council meeting. First, one systemic cancer within the police force is the police union. The union's only goal is to keep all officers employed regardless of what offense they have committed. This type of third-party collusion adds a layer of protection that no other citizen enjoys. It also gives the police that above-the-law attitude even when police are off the clock. I am requesting that there be a decertification discussion of the police union. I can assist at the next union meeting or help any officer who wants to initiate. The recent Supreme Court decision allows officers to stop paying union dues. Time to start now. Second, I need someone to explain to me why motorcycle police officers lay in wait many times on the sidewalk or the median, which no citizen on a motorcycle can do, and only at certain intersections to trap speeders and/or traffic light infractions. I have lived in many cities and don't understand why this has not been challenged in court on its merits alone. We do not live in a police state, yet their presence just waiting for someone to break the law is unacceptable and adds to the distrust of police. I have no problem holding up a sign warning drivers of impending police traps a block or two before the position of the police officer, should I see it in the future. Third, the immunity clause that will change all legal aspects of how police conduct themselves going forward needs to be discussed. When the Democrats agree with the Republicans, it's only a matter of time before this becomes law, a law that is long overdue. I would like to know if the Temecula Council is being proactive on the issue, as this will impact new recruits and the liability of current officers. Lastly, I have criticized the LAPD for other actions prior to the current chaos and was amazed to see an LAPD cruiser drive by my home soon afterwards, way out of jurisdiction and not a resident of where I live. I hope there is not this type of intimidation from the Temecula Police Department with my comments and concerns. Times they are changing. I hope the Temecula City Council is being proactive and are addressing the issues with the police and how they deal with the public going forward. The next speaker is Jonathan Chang. I am writing like so many others to address the issue of systemic police violence. Data proves that together, when these 9 policies can decrease police violence by more than 72%. Ban chokeholds and strangleholds, require de-escalation, require warning before shooting, require exhausting of all alternatives before shooting, duty to intervene, ban shooting at moving vehicles, require use of force continuum, require comprehensive reporting, require less than lethal weapons to be positioned on the dominant side. Chokeholds and strangleholds are inherently dangerous. Allowing officers to choke or strangle civilians results in unnecessary death or serious injury of civilians. Both chokeholds and all other neck restraints must be banned in all cases. Require officers to de-escalate situations where possible by communicating with subjects, maintaining distance, and otherwise eliminating the need to use force. Require officers to exhaust all other alternatives, including non-force and less lethal force options, prior to resorting to deadly force. Require officers to give a verbal warning in all situations before using deadly force. Require officers to intervene and stop excessive force used by other officers and report these incidents immediately to a supervisor. Ban officers from shooting at moving vehicles in all cases, which is regarded as a particularly dangerous and ineffective tactic. While some departments may restrict shooting at vehicles to particular situations, these loopholes allow for police to continue killing in situations that are all too common. 62 people were killed by police last year in these situations. This must be categorically banned. Establish a force continuum that restricts the most severe types of force to the most extreme situations and creates clear policy restrictions on the use of each police weapon and tactic. Require officers to report each time they use force or threaten to use force against civilians. Comprehensive reporting includes requiring officers to report whenever they point a firearm at someone, in addition to all other types of force. By placing less than lethal weapons on officers' deputies' strong side and repositioning lethal weapons to an alternate, less convenient location, less than lethal weapons will be the primary weapon system, saving countless lives each year. Having served in an active war zone and multiple deployments, we had strict rules of engagement before we could engage the enemy, even while we were under direct enemy fire. I am appalled that those same standards, at a minimum, do not apply to our law enforcement agencies who are here to serve and protect. Additionally, we had strict escalation of force procedures we were required to follow before we could use deadly force. I understand we do not have our own police force and we contract with Riverside County Sheriff's Department, and we have little say to their policies, tactics, techniques, and procedures. This obstacle can easily be overcome with a simple memorandum of agreement or memorandum of understanding for operating within city limits. That was 3 minutes. Emily Carrion. I am a resident of Temecula. Like many other Americans, I am concerned about police violence against Black Americans and the militarization of police. In the 2019-20 fiscal year, the city of Temecula spent 44% of its general fund on police, nearly $35 million, a 6.8% increase from the previous year. The city of Temecula spent an additional $3.7 million on police from the Measure S fund. This totals to $38.5 million this year alone. As the death of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and so many more illustrate, police presence makes Black Americans and people of color less safe. Yet the city of Temecula has continued to spend an inordinate amount of money contracting with the Riverside County Sheriff's Department, which has a history of using excessive force against people of color in our county. As one example, Riverside County Sheriff slammed Joaquina Valencia to the ground in 2017 because they assumed she was an undocumented immigrant. She is a citizen and has lived in the U.S. for over 4 decades. I asked City Council members via email on June 4, 2020, what they would do to advocate for change among Riverside County Sheriff's Department. I have received no responses. Today, I demand that our City Council members release a plan to ensure the Riverside County Sheriff's Department makes sweeping changes. One immediate change is to put out of commission the military-style equipment they have received from the Department of Defense since 1990. This tactical equipment is excessive and unnecessary for local law enforcement. Second, I demand that our city council members reduce our city's police budget for the following fiscal year and instead reinvest that money in Temecula residents, specifically residents of color. Black Americans are asking us to affirm that their lives matter. What is the city of Temecula's response? The next speaker is Stephanie Taveras. Please take a moment and stare at the color of your hands. What do you see? Now imagine you were reborn into a lower-income black or brown family. Your family decides to move to Temecula because it's safer and affordable. Now imagine going to a school where you were made fun of because of the color of your skin, and a certain teacher, Mrs. Poroy, tells you that you don't belong here. The school system doesn't do anything about the incident, so you continue your years. The police tend to pull you and your friends over more than your white friends because, quote, you didn't turn your signal light on, which then turns into an angry don't move license and registration. You then again continue with your life with these built-in microaggressions. Could you honestly say if you really were that imaginary person that the city council has made any movement towards racial equity in this city? What have you done? What can you do? And what are you going to do? Your family and generations down will learn about George Floyd's historic movement, just like how I learned about Rodney King. You have the privilege and power to make an impact and tell your family that you made a difference for the community in the city of Temecula. 2 racial attacks happened in 1 week, and none of you made a statement. Now remember your imaginary person. That person was me. The city of Temecula failed me, and it's failing others. This new generation was asleep, but now it's awake and ready to be heard. Racism will always exist in this city. We are realizing that it's community folks, but also those in power like yourself and anyone who sees injustice but doesn't say anything. Now tell me, City Council, are you a board that looks out for only whites like previous boards have done in the past, or are you a board that embodies inclusivity? I would like for you to do a full investigation on Josam and Michael Ashley Santana for the May 30th, 2020 assault, as well as a full investigation for the second assault that happened June 6, 2020. The abuser in the back seat has been identified as Brianna Starbuck. We still need the identity of the passenger. Their plate number is 7MXT235. Also take another look at Matthew Tucker's case where a police officer killed him in our own soil. Videos are uploaded on YouTube and Twitter. I hope to see a Pride festival soon. Monthly food pantries held by the city, mandatory sensitivity and cultural training for all public employees, celebration of Black History Month in Old Town, Senior Awareness Day, and well, you get the idea. Thank you. The next speaker is Christopher Bout. I am deeply saddened and disappointed by the recent events taking place around the resignation and the city's acceptance of said resignation from then Mayor James Stewart. Stu's comments do not bother me in that it was and should have remained a harmless error compounded by a not always accurate voice-to-text technology. Stu's dyslexic affliction and a nationwide pervasive outrage culture fueled by media glorification of all things even remotely perceived to be racist. You, Acting Mayor Edwards, bought into the outrage culture and showed a glaring weakness in the strength of your backbone and your shameful lack of resolve by accepting the resignation so effortlessly. The community would have rallied around him, but never got the chance. The city lost a perfect opportunity to rally around its leader and unify the city against this shameless finger-pointing and thin-skinned, holier-than-thou cultural elitist. We lost an opportunity to be a voice of reason in a sea of chaos and stand on conviction and values. But you chose to appease the mob and sacrifice Stu. You threw him to the wolves, and you know it. Stu is a pillar of the community and a kind and thoughtful man, and a kind and thoughtful human being. Stu placed the people of Temecula first before his own interest and stepped down to avoid the inevitable scrutiny the city would face and even possible mayhem coming from the anarchist and outrage culture currently being espoused by leftist media elitists. You underestimated Temecula in a reprehensible and embarrassing way. When is your term up, Ms. Edwards? That day can't come any sooner. The next speaker, okay, I have probably about 15 or so emails that are identical, except for the first sentence, which reflects how long they have been a Temecula resident. So I'm going to read the email once, and then I will go through each of the emails and read the one sentence that was different, letting you know how long they've been a Temecula resident. So first, the email. I'll read Anna Moreno's as the template email. I am writing like so many others to address the issue of systemic police violence. I have been a 10-year resident of Temecula, and I am concerned about our public safety contract with the Riverside County Sheriff's Department. I'd like to help propose some solutions to common policing issues like excessive force. Data proves that together, when these policies can decrease police violence by more than 72%. Ban chokeholds, strangleholds, and carotid holds, require de-escalation, require warning before shooting, require exhausting all alternatives before shooting, duty to intervene, ban shooting at moving vehicles, require use of force continuum, require comprehensive reporting, require less than lethal weapons to be positioned on the dominant side, and qualified immunity, create an independent third-party investigative authority to look into all complaints of excessive force against officers unaffiliated with the RSO or county sheriff. Analyze the types of calls into 911 for services and make sure that each category receives proper funding, i.e. if 20% of calls are for EMS, allocate 20% of funding to EMS. Allocate funds for a permanent PERT, psychological emergency response team of board-certified psychologists to accompany law enforcement on all mental health calls. Chokeholds and strangleholds are inherently dangerous. Carotid holds are simply blood chokes. The RSO currently allows these holds. Allowing officers to choke and strangle civilians results in the unnecessary death or serious injury of civilians. Both chokeholds and all other neck restraints must be banned in all cases. Require officers to de-escalate situations where possible by communicating with subjects, maintaining distance, and otherwise eliminating the need to use force. I understand that we do not have our own police force, and we contract with the Riverside County Sheriff's Department, and we have little say to their policies, tactics, techniques, and procedures. This obstacle can be easily overcome with a simple memorandum of agreement or memorandum of understanding for operating within city limits. I urge each of you to use the influence each of you have to demand these life-saving policies be enacted for all law enforcement officials operating within the Temecula city limits. Okay, so that was from Anna Moreno, and Anna is a 10-year resident of Temecula. Courtney Sheehan sent in the exact same email, and Courtney says she is a 6-year resident of Temecula. That's the only difference. Charity Barsizan sent in the exact same email. The only difference is she is an 8-year resident of Temecula Valley. Karen Wilson Bonner sent in the same email. She is a 7.5-year resident of Temecula. Laurel Lamont actually, there was one person that went ahead and pulled their email after it was sent. So Karen Wilson Bonar is 4-year resident of Temecula. Laurel Lamont is a 12-year resident. Sherry Bondi is a 1-year resident. Riley Wold is a 6-year resident of Temecula. Ms. Fairchild, she didn't give me her first name, and I can't tell from her email, is a 25-year resident of Temecula. Abraham Tarani is a 17-year resident of Temecula. And Catherine Wright, the only difference in her email was she added a sentence that said, "I was raised in Temecula, and my husband and I have chosen to build our own life here as adults, and now residents of Temecula for the past 6 years." Teresa Mansfield. She states she is a resident of Temecula. Sally Price, exact same email, and states she is a 7-year resident of Temecula. Ashley Cleansmith says that she is a same email, resident of Temecula. Reina Diaz, same email, resident for Temecula, 6 months. Tim McDonald, exact same email, resident of Temecula for 30 years. Tammy Sims, exact same email, resident of Temecula for 32 years. Frederick Ball, same email, resident of Temecula for 15 years. And Nathan Price, same email, resident of Temecula for 7 years. The next email is from Ira Robinson, and Ira says, "I am sending this message primarily to register my disappointment at the city's response to protests at the Duck Pond and at City Hall on May 30th, 2020. I was disappointed primarily because the city and its leadership team authorized an overwhelming show of force by the Sheriff's Department in response to essentially peaceful protests by a multiracial, multi-generational, and largely local group of youngsters who saw what happened to Mr. George Floyd and decided to organize and say no more. I was disappointed because the city appears to have simply assumed, as indicated by the mayor, that the protesters were not Temecula area residents, and that they were just trying to cause issues just like they did in LA and other cities around us. I am certain beyond doubt that the show of force decision was made by the city, but only after consultation with each and every reachable member of the city's leadership team. Perhaps a more diverse group would have made a different and better decision. I was disappointed because, according to one officer on the scene, the decision to declare the Duck Pond protest an unlawful assembly was prompted by the presence of a number of protesters in the street. One would think that within an area overflowing with officers, a handful of them could easily have addressed that concern. I was disappointed because the unlawful assembly order interrupted and had a chilling effect on what was otherwise an essentially peaceful exercise of the First Amendment rights of free speech and assembly. In the evening, some of the protesters and I moved from the Duck Pond to City Hall, a location which, like the Duck Pond, has been designated by the city as being among the good facilities for persons to gather for expressive activities. Once there, I was disappointed to find all access to City Hall courtyard blocked off by police cars and officers. I believe this denial of access was a clear violation of the First Amendment. More than anything, I was disappointed to learn that not a single member of the city's management team was present at any of the May 30th events. I believe we can do better. Finally, much has been said recently about the idea of reducing police funding and redirecting funds to things that are in short supply but badly needed, including things like mental health services, job training programs, school counselors and nurses, and computer equipment for needy students, affordable housing, and homelessness. While it is too soon for anyone to have firm views on this subject, it is my hope that the city will at least be thinking along these lines especially when it is considered that a whopping 44% of the city's annual operating budget is devoted to police services. And the last speaker under non-agendized items is Chris Smith. As a resident of Temecula and registered voter, I urge the 4 remaining council members to take concrete and demonstrable action to help make Temecula a truly inclusive city that welcomes individuals of all faiths, all races, ethnicities, orientations, and abilities. The former mayor's initial comments and later apologies may have been the most dramatic episode in the city's problematic approach to race, but it was far from the first. Councilmember Nagar declared himself the city's first African-American council member, a statement which may be technically accurate but grossly appropriates the experiences of Black Americans. Other council members have made many jokes about race and ethnicity, and then there's the constant dog whistling to nationalists and xenophobes like the pointless resolution to uphold the Constitution. Our council members are elected to be nonpartisan and to represent the interest of our community. Political posturing and well-intentioned but ill-informed statements do real damage to real people. They incite opposition to a mosque, protests against marriage equality, and racist firestorms defending a former mayor on social media. It's time to change. Affirm that Black Lives Matter without qualification. Fight against racism, not just the overt individual racism that wears a hood or swastika, but the less obvious, even more dangerous structural, institutional, and cultural racism. Seek experts to help identify and unlearn your own implicit biases. Reject the divisive partisan rhetoric that is tearing our country apart. Be the leaders the community needs. Be the leaders you were elected to be. And that is, Madam Mayor Pro Tem, is the last of the public comments on non-agendized items.
Thank you, Madam City Clerk. So the next item on the agenda would be the City Council reports. And because we're in a virtual setting, I'm going to ask each person individually and one at a time for the council reports. But if my colleagues will indulge me, I'd like to go first because we had a very, very good meeting today with members of the leadership from the demonstrators and also the president of the Temecula area NAACP and a couple of pastors from churches in the region. And the meeting lasted for 2 hours, and it was just, an open opportunity to have a discussion. And it was very cordial and very productive. And long story short, it was unanimously agreed by the people in attendance that they felt that these meetings should be conducted on a regular basis. And so if my colleagues would provide consensus, I would like to work with the city manager, city clerk, and city team to organize a regularly scheduled meeting with these individuals. And we could expand it to reach out for some additional community members. We want to keep it kind of small, just to service open discussion and have a clear and a cordial environment. So if my colleagues would like to say anything, I just tried to get consensus to bring it forward.
Madam Mayor, if I may?
Sure.
Yeah, I would concur with that. I would just ask that you communicate with the city council so that we can communicate what our concerns are so that if you're representing them, you can accurately reflect them.
Of course. Anybody else? Matt?
I have a much longer statement.
Go ahead.
And maybe some of what you're saying there, I got a lot of feedback here. You guys hearing that?
I did, I heard it.
Okay. So I've got several things I'd like to say, some recommendations kind of along the lines of what you're talking about, Marianne. I know we can't have a discussion here today, on this, but I wanted to provide this information today, give you a little bit of my perspective, because we haven't been able to do that publicly yet, and then discuss at some point in the future how we go about addressing some of these concerns and I think opportunities. So I'll start by saying I think the unfortunate words of James Stewart do not reflect the opinions or thoughts of the city or the city council. I think we can all agree on that. Words matter, especially when our nation, our state, our city is experiencing so many deep and unprecedented challenges. Being a mayor, or any elected official for that matter, demands a level of care in our communication that provides honest, open, and qualified responses. We have amazing resources right here at City Hall. Mm-hmm. We have experts, we have staff, we have public safety professionals, all here to support proper dialogue. And we need to remember that and use it. We are all first and foremost representatives of our community, not just, the social media community. I will say this isn't the first time I was critical of Mr. Stewart's comments online. I think we know that. In fact, I've on more than one occasion mentioned that, my disdain for doing city business on social media, right here in the chamber, and then individually with you as well. The comments, unfortunately were divisive, whether it was, related to pandemic or some earlier issues or other things. We saw posts taken down online. We saw, apologies here at City Hall, and it created a difficult dynamic, to be sure. I was encouraged, as I know several of you were, to speak with Mr. Stewart privately, which I did, and I think it was important that we had those conversations. I chose not to bring that conversation to our city council meeting. And I, in hindsight, regret that choice. And for that, I'm deeply sorry. I think had we had a more public conversation about our communication and how we represent our city council, our city, and ourselves, that maybe we could have avoided what happened last week. So, like I said, I've never agreed that city business should be done online. That's why we have City Hall. It's accessible, it's fair, it's transparent. It provides what the public has for, as long as we've had city councils, the opportunity to be heard and to have a voice. I want us to embrace Temecula. I want us to embrace our small town, but we have to recognize that we are a $1 billion plus tourism economy. Make no mistake, we are already on the national stage. And so when we do anything, it reflects, our community and our city. We can support being a small town and a large tourism economy. We can do both at the same time, but we have to do it carefully, and we have to do it professionally. We owe it to our residents, we owe it to our family, and we owe it to our businesses. We must support our community, and we must allow all of these voices to be heard. Now is not the time for us to make any hollow promises or any carefully worded platitudes. And that's not what we've ever been known for, right? We've never been known for that. So, I was at both gatherings in front of City Hall. And at the last one, I stood with Councilmember Nagar and Mr. Schwank, and we listened. It was incredible. It was passionate. It was amazingly eloquent voices by our own students, our own kids, saying just remarkable things that I was moved beyond words, and I know you were too. But that conversation can't stop there. I know we have already met with community members. I know we want to continue that dialogue. And I know we have a lot of ideas that we all want to share and thoughts on this. But like I said, we have to either provide a response and a plan that is appropriate, respectful, meaningful, and measurable, or we better not doing anything at all, right? Because our community deserves that. We don't want to be followers. We never have been. We've always been leaders, right? And we've Mike, you said that at a recent meeting, and you talked about how Temecula has always stood out, and we're not here to wait for others to tell us what to do. We're here to help lead that change, and a change that really reflects Temecula, right? Really reflects our community and our collective desire to become our better self. All that said, I ask that the council consider the following. It's not a comprehensive list at all. It's just my early thoughts on all of this. And for the city manager and city clerk and city attorney's office, I'll be providing this in writing as well, so don't worry about scribbling these things down. First, and we've already started this, is to work with community leaders to identify a qualified and professional individual or firm who can help facilitate a fair, balanced, and meaningful community dialogue and support the city council, and our staff in our plans for change and community response. Number two, to seek a professional consultant for public communications, outreach, and public relations. Again, we should do this in partnership with our community leaders, and make sure that in that it includes a review of all of our public resources online, for our website and everything else. We have some amazing communications folks, and I don't want to take away from the very hard work that they do. But arguably, I don't think any of us have had very specific training with some of the circumstances that we're facing today, and that requires professional support. And so I'd ask that we look for that. And I also know, our city staff, city manager's office have worked very hard, especially in recent weeks, related to a conversation on the training and support for staff with regard to these issues. And I understand this is already happening. I understand this is 100% in the purview of the city manager's office, but I just wanted to express my support and gratitude for moving so quickly to have that conversation internally. Number four, I'd like us to explore the development of a policy or resolution that addresses the expectations and standards of communication of this city council and future councils. This is not, let me be very clear, this is not intended to infringe on speech in any way whatsoever, right? Please understand that. It creates a standard and an expectation for ourselves, so we all understand, and for future councils, as a reminder that we must always take this role seriously and conduct ourselves and our communications with the utmost of care and integrity. And so I'd like to see us draft a resolution along those lines. Number five, I'd like to identify the appropriate support for council to have media relations training for both this council and future councils. Number six, I'd like to discuss options for improved community support and relations within our police department. This should also include a discussion of the continuation of our coffee with the cop and the coffee with the mayor when I was mayor, right? We had this ethic within the community, and I know we still do, where we sit down in a very casual atmosphere and we have just person-to-person conversations. I found that to be one of the most meaningful things I did as mayor. And we rotated them all over town. If you remember, we did them about once a month or so. And I found this to be incredibly valuable and beneficial. I was disappointed to see that it stopped, after I stepped down as mayor. But I think we need to revisit that. I think we need to contemplate having it in our districts. I know, Mr. Schwenk, you've had similar conversations and thoughts about this as well, so I don't want to steal your thunder on that. But I think it's important that we have that conversation again. We sit down with our community and we mend, we mend the feelings and the concerns. My experience is, a cup of coffee and a calm atmosphere really provides for much better dialogue than us sitting here and people coming to the dais. And I will say that on more than one occasion when I did host those events, I heard issues long before they rose to the level of an emergency. And we were able to be very proactive about it and allowing us to be engaged with our residents, our families, and our businesses. And I think a lot of people really benefit from that. And we were able to really bring back some good change as a result. Number 7, a resolution condemning all forms of racism, denouncing discrimination and hate, condemning the killing of George Floyd. And it's more than simply saying we are not racist. We must assert that we are against racism in that. Number 8, I'd like us to also respond to the requests to review the case of Matthew Tucker here in the city of Temecula. And based on some of the comments and emails I've received, I'd also like to find out more and review for the incidents that occurred during the protests that were mentioned during public comment. That's all I have for now. Like I said, I'll be providing that in written response to the city manager's office. I appreciate you indulging me a little bit longer on my public comments or council comments.
I had the
this
gavel
evening.
out.
But
I didn't.
I do. I appreciate that. And like I say, I think this is just the start of a very, very important conversation. And I look forward to the opportunity where we can have a discussion as a council instead of just limiting our responses to comments.
I'm very pleased because
you.
many of the things you mentioned were discussed at length today, so it's
Madam Mayor?
amazing.
I was responding to your question for a consensus, but if we're taking council comments, I'd like to weigh in.
Yeah, okay.
All right. Is that appropriate?
You'd like to do what? You
Well,
wanna
if
go
you're
ahead
taking
and-
council comments now, I'd like to weigh in.
Well, I was waiting for Matt to say consensus at the end, but I think it was implied in his statement.
Well, I did have that question, and then, of course, I have my own comments,
Yeah,
but
I think as far as your request, Mary Ann, I think we need to have that conversation about how we best facilitate
Yes.
a conversation with our community and with the council.
Yes, that was discussed also.
Yeah.
okay. So, Dr. Ron, fantastic leadership. The things that you have just recited, I think, I know speak for me. You nailed it. And I like what you said in relation to Madam Mayor waiting until we set those foundations that you had mentioned. Mm-hmm. And I think that's appropriate. And I thank you for your thoughtful words. I really do think you nailed it and is going to put what we need to do on the right path. Mm-hmm. We have not been able to meet as a council since the reprehensible and heinous killing of George Floyd. And I think, again, I don't want to get out in front of anybody, but I know for me, I could not watch it. For me, it was straight up murder. And I just can't even process it. And I think that's important to say. And I know we all are going to have our own comments regarding that. I also wanted to talk about the protest that was held last Friday. I too, as you had mentioned, Councilmember Ron, was very impressed. I did not know what to expect. I have to honestly tell you, I was in the back room praying. I did not know, and Matt, you and I prayed before we went out because we did not know what our role would be. We did not know how to respond. But I went out there, and the folks who led the protest from the very beginning took the air of controversy right out of it. Yeah. They just removed it. And from then on, it was a gathering of love and communication and mutual respect. And I enjoyed interacting with a lot of people that day. And they set the city on a path of what I think is going to be outstanding dialogue. And so if they're watching tonight, I want to thank them for that. Temecula, over the past, I think, over maybe 10 years or more, has led the region, and by golly, a lot of the United States have looked to us in the area of inclusion. We've mastered it. We've done that in the area primarily of special needs individuals. And I see no reason why that cannot be extended to those who feel that they're disenfranchised. If it's race, then we'll look at it. We have to. That's what we're here for. And we'll look at everything else as well. But we can do it because we've done it already. And in fact, people, as I've said, so much goes on here at City Hall that not every member of the public can see it. In fact, the resources you mentioned that exist here are tremendous. Mm-hmm. But I remember last year when I was acting as mayor, we had a contingent from China wanting to examine our inclusivity programs. And they heard about it as far as China. They wanted to match them. And so we have a lot to offer and a lot to build upon, and I'm looking forward to that. Lastly, I will say that, from participating and being out last Friday during the protest, and it was a protest, but it really was more than a protest. It morphed into a great communication session and a communication of love for mankind and mutual respect for everybody. I just want to reach out and tell the community, from my point of view, there may be areas where I don't know what I don't know, okay? So I'm going to do a lot of listening. That's the first thing I'm going to do. And that's why I liked what you said, Dr. Ron, because we need to listen, formulate a plan, and then move on it. But I need to know more. I need to listen more. I need to find out areas where I'm not hitting the mark. Those are things that I need to do so that I can effectively participate as a representative of this city to ensure that everybody gets treated equally and also move things forward appropriately. That's it, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Zach?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. This has been a pretty emotional week for me and our family and obviously our community, so indulge me. I put my thoughts to paper this morning, and I'm going to read them for everyone right now. So there's no doubt that the last 3 months have been some of the most difficult times in our lives. We certainly have struggled as a community. It's certainly been a learning experience for me. It's also important for me to express that I'm still learning and will continue to grow as a person and as an elected official. It's always been important for me to be present in our community through the good times and the bad. And we started off the month of March laser focused on fighting COVID-19. We were together and we pivoted together. We continued delivering services to the community, albeit in a virtual way. We continued to serve our seniors in a drive-through way. My point is that we adapted during this pandemic, and we did that united. We were united as a city. So with COVID-19 in the background, we're in the midst of a movement. The level of activism and involvement is unprecedented in my lifetime. Mm-hmm. Through a traditional education, I learned the basics of the civil rights movement, slavery, and oppression. And as a white man, it has taken me years to try to understand what it is like to live in America as a person of color. I believe it also takes a desire to learn. I must be willing to look inside myself and acknowledge my privilege. We are living in an age of information. While we have unrestricted access to information, that is clearly not enough. Personally, I seek out information in an effort to absorb as much knowledge as possible to appreciate, accept, and understand our community, our country, and the world. I believe seeking knowledge builds empathy. Over the past 2 weeks, our community has held daily Black Lives Matter protests and several vigils. Seeing these events in person was extremely helpful for me. I saw people I knew. I saw students. I saw teachers, professionals taking a stand. I'm sure many had taken a stand online in the past, but to see people out holding signs and shouting, it was truly powerful to see that. The ability to peacefully protest is enshrined in our Constitution, and it's exciting to see this happening in our community. It feels like there will be some genuine change. I also noticed how these protests have been normalized. I'm seeing more and more people out protesting for the first time in their lives, and there's something to be said for that. We often prefer to put off hard work until a later date, kick the can down the road, if you will. But I firmly believe that that will not be happening here. We are being held accountable. We saw that with former Mayor Stewart's resignation. His actions and words have consequences. As elected officials, it is our responsibility to lead, but to also represent. It is important for us to recognize that we all have implicit bias. Once we're able to understand our unconscious bias, we can only then begin the process of healing. Let me be clear, though, racism in any form is unacceptable. It's not enough to not be racist. We need to be anti-racist. So what happens next? I think that's where we start this dialogue of what we're going to do next. And these are just my thoughts. I believe we need a community-level conversations in small groups. We need our families, our school district, our faith community, civic leaders to all start meaningful dialogue. We need to formally apologize to our community and acknowledge their struggles. We need to focus on equity and diversity. Some of this we're already doing, and we should be proud of that, but we must press on. I believe we cannot hashtag or brand our way out of this. We must bring about actionable solutions that facilitate systemic change in Temecula. I believe we need to celebrate our entire community, and whether that means lighting up City Hall or hosting diverse groups at the Old Town Temecula Theater or community-wide festivals, we must embrace our community. To that end, I'm hopeful, and I believe our best days are ahead. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Zach. I absolutely agree that our best days are ahead. Everyone made profound statements just now, and some of the things that we heard today in our community meeting, and Mike, you're right, we have led the way, and it's been the Temecula way. I think we're bold, we have excellent staff, do their homework, and we're not afraid to take those chances that things will be better. And because they're so thorough, it has worked every time, and Temecula is what it is today because of the strong leadership we've had. So, I was at the duck pond a couple of times, and what I saw were students, were our high school students mostly, and they were very spirited. They were having a wonderful time. They had a huge sense of pride, and many of them were experiencing that type of environment and expressing their opinion for the very first time, which is why it was so important to make it a cordial environment and a safe environment. And they even recognized that other people might want to cause trouble. And they were willing to recognize that and, try to safeguard against it in their groups. That was wonderful. And good leaders are always learning. I mean, we should never stop learning, and from other people especially. And I think good leaders also accept that they don't know everything, and good leaders do listen. That's the way that we share, that's the way that we build relationships, that's the way that we build trust. And without trust, nothing else works. If you don't have trust in a relationship, nothing else is going to work that you try. So what we found today, that everyone is on the same page, and we're eager to listen, and we're eager to share, and everyone agreed that there's value, and I don't even want to say on both sides. We didn't have sides today, which was remarkable. It was wonderful. We just had a conversation about different experiences. So I think it's going to be a wonderful addition to the city of Temecula to add this type of a committee, and they actually called it a community action committee. And that's what it would be. It would be an intentional effort to reach out, to continuously learn, to see what, try and see what's coming our way and to prepare for it, and to prevent bad things and encourage the good things. So thank you, gentlemen. And I think the idea would be to, get with staff and let them know how you envision that this committee would work. And then they'll craft something and bring it back. And our partners today that we met with were eager to see how, that would come about. But you'd be interested to know they were saying the same things you were saying and that I was saying. So I'm very heartened by everything that happened. And I want to thank all of them for being there, and staff that was there. Thank you all for being there. Okay, so that's City Council reports. So we can now move on to the consent calendar. All matters listed under consent calendar are considered to be routine, and all will be enacted by one roll call vote. There will be no discussion of these items unless members of the city council request specific items be removed from the consent calendar for separate action. Okay. Do you want to present the consent calendar, Madam City Clerk?
Sure. Madam Mayor Pro Tem, happy to. Number 1 is waive reading of standard ordinances and resolutions. Number 2 is approve action minutes of May 21st and May 26th, 2020. Number 3 is approve list of demands. Number 4 is adopt ordinance 2020-06, amending Chapter 17.21, Affordable Housing Overlay Zone of the Temecula Municipal Code, Long Range Project Number LR 20-0279, second reading. Number 5 is adopt resolution reaffirming and proclaiming the existence of a local emergency related to the COVID-19 virus pandemic. Number 6 is adopt resolutions regarding the November 3rd, 2020 general municipal election. Number 7 is receive and file the 2019 general plan annual progress report. And Madam Mayor Pro Tem, that concludes the reading of the consent calendar.
All right. And would any member like to remove anything or pull anything from consent? Okay, then I've got a motion.
Move the consent.
Motion and a second, okay? Are we taking,
We will need to take a roll call vote. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Councilmember Nagar, I did hear the first. Who was the second?
Matt?
I was.
Matt? Okay.
So we can go ahead with the roll call vote.
So, Mayor Pro Tem Edwards?
Aye.
Councilmember Nagar?
Aye.
Councilmember Ron?
Aye.
Councilmember Schwenk?
Aye.
And that passes unanimously.
All right, so right now I'm going to recess the Temecula City Council meeting to the Temecula Community Services District and turn the meeting over to Councilmember Schwank. It's all yours.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I'm going to call tonight's Temecula Community Services District meeting to order. Madam City Clerk, would you mind calling the roll for us, please?
Director Edwards?
Here.
Director Nagar? Here. Director Ron?
Here.
And President Schwenk?
I'm here. Thank you very much. Do we have any public comments this evening?
We do not.
Okay, thank you. I'll dispense with the reading of the rules, and we'll move on to our consent calendar. All matters listed under the consent calendar are considered to be routine and will be enacted by one roll call vote. There will be no discussion of these items unless members of the Temecula Community Services District request specific items to be removed from the consent calendar for separate action. We have 3 items on consent calendar today. Item number 8, approve the action minutes of May 26, 2020.
President Schwenk, I apologize. We only
Yeah.
have one item.
And
I
I
was
just
looking for
flipped
the
the
other
page
two.
looking for the other 2.
Me
We
too.
have one item. All right, I'll entertain a motion.
Move approval.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second, and a roll call vote, please.
Director Edwards?
Aye.
Director Nagar?
Aye.
Director Ron?
Aye.
And President Schwenk?
Aye. Thank you very much. That passes. Director Hawkins, do we have a director's report this evening?
Yes, we do, Mr. President. A couple of items, but first, I really appreciate the comments from the entire board, the entire council. So well said. Just switching rails quickly, you know, as activities and programs slowly come back online, TCSD has already started the summer season in a fun and safe fashion. You know, yesterday marked the start of our summer movie series at home, which will run through the week of June 22nd. Now, each week, a movie is selected and staff creates a tutorial video of a craft or activity related to the movie. So for Tarzan, Greg, it may be a jungle animal handprint craft activity related to the movie. Or Aaron for Frozen 2, a snowball toss, and themed scavenger hunt. Fun for the entire family. Remember, families are encouraged to watch the movie at home using their own streaming service. And this week on June 11th, TCSD will host concerts every Thursday in June on Facebook. So tune in to the Temecula Parks and Rec Facebook page for a live concert at 7 p.m. Videos of the concert will remain available on the Facebook page after it ends. So check listings for the Summer Sunset Concert Series at Home lineup. And then finally, switching back to earlier, you know, it's been said, we all witness that the world was recently reminded that as global citizens, we are in the midst of 2 pandemics. COVID-19 and the legacy of racism. You know, Dr. King once said, and once asked, actually, where do we go from here? Chaos or community? As a department dedicated to creating community through people, parks, and programs, that's our answer. And we'll be there to do our part. Mr. President, that concludes my report.
Thank you, Director Hawkins. We need you.
Yeah.
General Manager's report this evening?
Nothing further tonight, Mr.
All right.
President.
Board of Directors report?
Nope.
Nothing? All right, I'll go ahead and move adjournment. We are adjourned to the next meeting, June 23rd, 2020 at 5:30.
And thank you, and I'm going to reconvene the Temecula City Council meeting. We have some public hearings tonight, 2 public hearings. So, Madam City Clerk, since we are in the virtual setting, would you please share the rules for the public hearings?
Yes, Madam Mayor Pro Tem Edwards, we actually will note for the record that you are reconvening the meeting of the Temecula City Council, the Community Services District, and the successor agency to the redevelopment agency. Any person may submit written comments to the City Council before or during a public hearing in support of or in opposition to the approval of the projects in the manner prescribed in the important notice at the top of the agenda. If they challenge any of the projects in court, they may be limited to raising only those issues they or someone else raised in written correspondence delivered to the city clerk at or prior to the public hearing. In addition, this meeting is being conducted in a manner that is consistent with Executive Order N29-20. The meeting may be viewed and public comments may be submitted and read into the record pursuant to the important notice provided at the top of the agenda. Item number 9 is a public hearing with action by the City Council only, and item number 10 is a public hearing with action by the City Council, Community Services District, and SARDA.
All right, thank you. So first we have item number 9, and could we have a staff report, please?
Yes. Good evening, members of the council. It is good to see you all in person, and I am grateful to be here to listen to the important conversation that you just had and the direction of our city going forward, so thank you. Tonight, I will discuss and ask for a recommendation on the updated Community Development Block Grant Citizen Participation Plan and a substantial amendment to the 2019-2020 Annual Action Plan for the City Council to formally approve and adopt the Temecula Assist Small Business Grant Program. On March 27, 2020, the Federal Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, also known as the CARES Act, was signed into law. The CARES Act distributed an additional allocation of CDBG funds, known as CDBG CV funds, to entitlement jurisdictions for the prevention and response to the COVID-19 pandemic. The city anticipates receiving a $329,152 allocation of CDBG CV funds for COVID-19 prevention and response, and intends to utilize these funds through the implementation of Temecula Assist, which I will outline in a moment. The funding authorized under the CARES Act allows for certain provisions and flexibilities to enable grantees to efficiently utilize the funding to respond to and address the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. To take advantage of these flexibilities, the city must submit a waiver to HUD requesting to utilize these provisions. The city must also amend its Citizen Participation Plan and 2019-20 Annual Action Plan in order to allow for the immediate expenditure of these funds. The area of biggest flexibility is reducing the noticing period from 30 days to 5 days during this time. Several modifications were made to the Citizen Participation Plan in response to both the guidelines under the CARES Act as well as other recent regulations passed by HUD. These updates include participation requirements for CDBG disaster recovery and supplemental appropriations, such as CDBG CV, special exceptions and urgent need waivers, anti-displacement and relocation, and real property policies. At the May 21st, 2020 City Council Budget Workshop, City Council recommended moving forward with a $500,000 small business relief grant program called Temecula Assist. Primarily funded with CDBG CV funding, Temecula Assist provides direct relief to business owners with 2 different grant opportunities. One grant is funded with CDBG CV funds, the Job Retention and Rent Recovery Grant, and this allocates up to $10,000 for businesses for rent, mortgage, or payroll expenses. The goal of the Rent Recovery and Job Retention Program is to assist business owners and operations during the global pandemic, as well as to create economic opportunities by creating and retaining jobs held by low or moderate income individuals within the city of Temecula. The Business Improvement Grant, which is funded by the general fund, provides businesses up to $5,000 grants, which with the primary focus being to offset costs related to new health requirements for social distancing. The application period opened on May 26th and ran through today, June 9th, 2020. We received approximately 223 applications, with 138 applications for the Job Retention and Rent Recovery Program and 85 applications for the Business Improvement Program. Tomorrow, the city will hold a random draw or lottery to preliminarily select the businesses that are awarded grants from the Temecula Assist program. Staff will utilize the third-party website called random.org for the random draw. This website creates a permanent, immutable record that is maintained on their website. The website guarantees that the selection is completely random and that no one can influence the outcome. The city will also record the lottery for transparency and auditing purposes. After the lottery is held, the city will screen selected businesses for eligibility, including meeting the criteria that were detailed in the program guidelines. Staff may also request additional supporting documentation from the business to confirm program eligibility and to meet the requirements of the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. Staff will continue to go down the 2 different random draw lists, one for each grant, until the funding has been exhausted. After eligibility is confirmed, the city will enter into an agreement with each of the selected businesses. Funding will be available immediately upon receiving a fully executed agreement. The city will assist at least 67 businesses through this program. With that, staff recommends that the City Council adopt 2 resolutions. One is for the updated Citizen Participation Plan, and the second one is for the substantial amendment to the 2019-20 Action Plan for the allocation and expenditure of CDBG CV funds. That concludes my presentation, and I am available if you have any questions. Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions? I actually have a couple of questions. So I know we're going to have the lottery first, and is that something that people can observe or listen to or online?
It is not, and it is not as exciting as it sounds, unfortunately. There's not a big rolly thing with ping pong balls that you can pick out of. So the website, random.org, I will cut and paste a list of the businesses into their website, and then it shuffles them, and then it orders them for us. So 1 from 185, for example. So we'll hold it via a Zoom meeting, and we have Maricela from RWG is attending, and so our CDBG consultants will record it, and we'll have it available for transparency purposes. Our main concern is that as we go down through the list, that some of the people who have submitted applications will not be eligible. So
and that was my next question. So they're not eligible, but it has sorted all of them. So you would just go down to the next one on the list?
Yes, we will sort all of the applications, so we will continue to go down.
Okay, that was my first and second question. Mike, anything?
No question.
Okay, so we can open the public hearing. And do we have any public comments for the public hearing?
We do not have any
We
public
do not, and I always say going once, going twice, and we will close the public hearing, and I will entertain council comments or a motion.
Madam Mayor?
Sir.
I'll move the item, and then my comment is, while some may be disenfranchised in the lottery, let's see how it works. If it turns out that it is really productive, we'll find some more money somewhere. That's my comment.
Okay, so we have a motion and?
I'll second.
And a second. So we do a roll call vote, please.
Mayor Pro Tem Edwards?
Aye.
Councilmember Nagar?
Aye.
Councilmember Ron?
Aye.
Councilmember Schwenk?
Aye.
All right, that passes unanimously. And we have one more public hearing. So, and that's for the approved fiscal year's capital improvement program. So can we have a staff report, please?
Yes, thank you. Good evening, Madam Mayor, Pro Tem, and members of the City Council. I will disclose early and upfront the operating budget is balanced, the community services budget is balanced, the capital improvement program remains aggressive and with adjustments. I will also disclose that through the very diligent work of Jennifer and her budget team, we will also be sharing how we manage to balance out the next 60 months, albeit making many assumptions on our revenue projections. So now you know how the story ends, and it's important for us to share what transpired between January and today, June 9th, 2020. It is also very important for us to share the economic devastation that occurred in 4 months and is projected to continue into the next fiscal year. Nobody is immune to the fiscal impacts of such a crisis. In January, we set out creating a very healthy budget. It was aggressive again by Temecula standards, expecting moderate growth and varied revenue sources, but truly built upon our fiscal year 1920 operating budget and the health and growth of our local and our national economy. But this all changed in mid-March as the world began to report the devastation of COVID-19. The United States of America began incrementally shutting down at varied levels. Declarations of emergency were signed by the World Health Organization, the White House, California Governor, the Riverside County Board of Supervisors, and then by myself, and ratified by the Temecula City Council on March 24th. We had officially entered into a global pandemic environment with no known end date, no instructions on how to navigate, and an unknown fiscal impact as economies were shutting down. These had become unprecedented times and uncharted waters. The weathering of this storm for our city has been built on 30 years of very intentional and wise fiscal investments, prudent restraint, and fiscally conservative and responsible planning. I will get into more of these examples later in our agenda. While Jennifer, Pat, and myself will be covering the entirety of the presentation and speaking to the slides, every valued member of the executive team is here and available for any technical explanations or clarity at the end for the City Council. At this time, Jennifer will now share the agenda for this evening's presentation. Jen?
Thank you, Aaron. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and City Council members. In addition to the fiscal impacts of the pandemic, tonight's presentation will provide an in-depth explanation of the economic and financial assumptions used to project the city's various revenue sources. As Aaron mentioned, he will spend some time reflecting on the city's strong fiscal position and how our 30 years of prudent fiscal management have prepared us to withstand this unprecedented economic impact. I will then summarize the budget projections for the General Fund, Measure S, and TCSD funds, and we will also review the proposed staffing levels, and Pat Thomas will provide an update on the city's capital improvement program. On March 24th, 2020, Council approved the city's declaration of emergency in response to the California State Governor's executive order requiring a statewide stay-at-home order in an attempt to slow the spread of the COVID-19 coronavirus. Several of the city's major revenue sources will be significantly impacted by the business closures and stay-at-home orders, with sales tax and Measure S being hit the hardest. The city's operating revenues, including General Fund, Measure S, and TCSD, totals $110 million. Within a 4-month period, the city will experience a 13% decline, or nearly $15 million in lost revenue for the current fiscal year. We are anticipating an additional $8.8 million decline next fiscal year, as compared to the original or pre-COVID budget projections. The city's revenue base for the next 5 years will be roughly $5 million lower each year as compared to our preliminary budget forecast. This chart illustrates the dramatic impact of the loss of revenue has had on the city's available reserve funds. On the chart, the blue bars represent the combined fund balance of the General Fund, TCSD, and Measure S funds. The black marks show the portion of the fund balance that is reserved for economic uncertainty and the secondary reserve designed to cover revenue shortfalls. The green line represents the amount of available fund balance over and above the reserves. And as you can see, with the dramatic loss in revenue, all available reserves are depleted by the end of this fiscal year, and fund balance will go negative by the end of 22-23, unless corresponding reductions in expenditures are implemented. Multiple budget reduction measures were included in the budget to offset this loss in revenue and balance the operating funds in all 5 years of the forecast. Personnel cost reductions include the release of 137 part-time or seasonal employees, the majority of which are in TCSD, and the deferral of filling 3 vacant positions. Operating expenditures reflect a 7% reduction in departmental budgets for fiscal year 2021 and the deferral of capital outlay purchases, including the replacement of vehicles, equipment, and technology. And the deferral of asset management contributions and capital improvement project expenditures will also help balance the 5-year and will be revisited throughout the year as the economy begins to recover. This slide illustrates that budgetary reductions are factored into each year of the 5-year forecast. With nearly $15 million in lost revenue in just the last 4 months, there's not adequate time left in this fiscal year to reduce the operating budget by an equal amount. The fiscal year 1920's operating budget reductions total $6.3 million, with 2021 reductions totaling $12.5 million. You can see in the last row of the table that over the next couple of years, it will be necessary to utilize a portion of the $3.9 million secondary reserve to balance the general fund. However, it's also important to note that at this point, we do not foresee the need to dip into the reserve for economic uncertainty. The nature of budgeting is heavily reliant on assumptions. However, this particular budget in this unprecedented economy has been even more challenging and is largely built on many unknown factors. With 57% of our total operating revenues coming from sales tax and Measure S, we spent a great deal of time analyzing the impacts of the pandemic on each business sector. Our sales tax consultant, HDL Companies, also provided their budget projections, which ironically came within $5,000 of our own internal projections for fiscal year 1920, and within 1.2% of our projections for fiscal year 2021. According to our local auto dealerships, sales activity came to a halt shortly after the stay-at-home orders. While their service departments remained open, we only received sales tax on the sale of the parts and not the services provided. The business and industry sector within Temecula is primarily driven by medical supply sales, so this sector is expected to remain strong. And it's expected that the online sales will rise dramatically during this pandemic, so the county pool allocations, which is where online sales are categorized, are anticipated to increase. Projections for sales tax next fiscal year also show reductions in the first 3 quarters compared to the pre-COVID time period, with recovery expected by Q2 of 2021. However, with the unprecedented unemployment levels and the fear-induced nature of this crisis, we project consumer behavior to rebound much slower than originally thought, causing a prolonged recovery. This slide shows a graphical illustration of our sales tax projections over time. Sales tax is seasonal and has its peaks and valleys throughout the year. However, you can see the overall magnitude of the COVID reduction and the anticipated recovery. With sales tax declining by 10% this fiscal year and 12% in fiscal year 2021 compared to the pre-COVID projection, the city's general fund operations will need to be adjusted significantly to offset a loss in revenue of this magnitude. Assumptions on TOT revenue are aligned with projections of Visit Temecula Valley and are based on the occupancy levels we're currently experiencing. Several hotels have either requested TOT relief or have not remitted their taxes over the past couple of months. For fiscal year 1920, we're projecting a 19% reduction in TOT as compared to the prior fiscal year. Property tax revenue is less impacted than other revenue sources due to the timing of when the county assesses the property values, which occurred prior to the COVID pandemic. Property transfer tax and supplemental taxes, which occur when homes sell or are remodeled, will likely be impacted if home prices fall in response to the pandemic. However, as a city that participates in the Teeter Plan, we are paid based on the assessments as opposed to when property tax bills are actually paid. The county keeps all interest and penalties accrued on late payments, but the city is made whole. Future property tax revenue may decline if property values drop. So we have included a reduction in our long-term projected growth rate from 3% down to 1% for property tax. I'd like to turn the presentation back over to City Manager Aaron Adams, who will discuss the city's fiscal foundation.
Thank you, Jen. As I mentioned in my introduction, our city has been built on 30 years of very intentional and wise fiscal investments, prudent restraint, fiscally conservative and responsible planning. I want to emphasize that while the revenue impacts Jennifer shared are significant to our local economy and to city revenue, they are not devastating to the city's budget due to the multiple fiscal decisions and policies that you've approved over the city's history. Through strong fiscal leadership, we've had a lean and motivated organization since the Great Recession. We've controlled spending, we've kept our debt ratio low, and we've established several separate funds that can provide resources if needed. By and large, the most significant factor in our ability to absorb the anticipated economic impact is the council and the community's support in passing Measure S back in November 2016. This revenue source has not only provided the city with increased public safety staffing, numerous capital improvement projects, and the ability to establish asset management replacement funds. It now provides the necessary safety net to allow the city to maintain the service levels. A variety of funding sources and reserves are available to absorb the impact of the pandemic and significant loss of revenue. Measure S is considered unrestricted and will be heavily relied upon to balance the general fund and TCSD operations. Available fund balance is also unrestricted and was fully utilized to offset the drop in general fund revenue and balance the fund. Reserve funds, as mentioned earlier, we do plan to utilize a very small portion of our secondary reserves to balance fiscal year 2021 and 21-22. However, the reserve for economic uncertainty will remain fully funded for the time being. The city has several replacement funds that we've established for fleet maintenance, facilities, technology, and street maintenance. These funds are dedicated to future asset replacement per budget policy, but they can be redirected and utilized for other purposes with the council's approval if need be. We also have funds set aside that are restricted for specific uses. It is notable to mention these funds will remain intact despite the budgetary constraints that we're facing. The city established an irrevocable pension trust 2 years ago. These funds are restricted for pension payments to CalPERS. While the balance in the trust fluctuates with the market, the current balance is roughly $11.5 million, which is enough to cover nearly 3 years' worth of pension obligation payments. I might add, we're not utilizing this trust for this year's payments. The city is self-insured for workers' compensation, and we carry a reserve of $1.8 million dedicated to potential workers' compensation claims. And finally, we continue to preserve the funding for our retiree medical benefit, and we hold these funds in an irrevocable trust, which currently has a balance of $11.6 million. At this time, I'll turn the presentation back over to Jennifer, who will share the highlights of the fiscal year 2021 proposed operating budget.
Thanks, Aaron. With the COVID impact affecting revenue so late in the fiscal year, there was not adequate time to reduce expenditures enough to offset the loss in revenue. So expenditures will outpace revenue for fiscal year 1920 by $4.7 million. By fiscal year 2021, the decline in net revenue will be much lower, reducing the dependence on fund balance to cover the shortfall in revenue. Contributions or transfers to other funds include payments for capital projects, debt service for the Civic Center and Margarita Recreation Center facilities, and the previous contribution made to the pension trust Aaron mentioned previously. The fiscal year 1920 ending fund balance is expected to be $22.9 million, of which $19.3 million is reserved and another $356,000 is committed to provide Pechanga-funded staffing. An undesignated fund balance of $3.2 million is quickly exhausted in fiscal year 2021 as it is being utilized to balance the general fund. This chart's designed to illustrate the different fund balance components mentioned throughout this presentation. In looking at the bottom of the slides, you see the total fund balance for each year, and the fund balance is made up of the components displayed above. The first layer is the portion committed to future capital projects and the Pechanga-funded staffing. The next layer is the reserve for economic uncertainty, which represents 20% of the operating expenditures. Then the next portion is for the secondary reserve, which represents 5% of operating expenditures. And finally, the green section is the undesignated or available fund balance. These funds are unrestricted and can be used for one-time expenditures. And you can see how quickly these funds are exhausted as they are utilized to balance the general fund. Oops. Graphically, the black line on the chart shows the dip in revenues expected in fiscal year 1920 and the gradual recovery over the next 5 years. Revenues are projected to begin ramping up slowly in late 2020, with faster growth anticipated for 21-22 as the economy hopefully returns to normal. On this chart, the blue columns show the dramatic $10.6 million decline in fund balance in fiscal year 1920, with a further decline of $3.4 million in fiscal year 2021. Desired reserve levels indicated by the yellow diamonds are anticipated to be achieved in fiscal year 21-22 as fund balance begins to increase again. A reduction in the fiscal year 1920 revenue of over $5 million is anticipated, causing the need to reprioritize the appropriation of Measure S funds. With more Measure S needed to fund general fund and TCSD services, less funding is available for asset management or capital improvement projects. Over the ensuing 5 years, you can see how Measure S is expected to rebound, and as fund balance begins to replenish, it will be programmed to fund future CIP projects that were shifted out due to the lack of funding. And as general fund revenue grows, the reliance on Measure S fund will decrease. Upon the issuance of stay-at-home orders, TCSD shuttered their facilities and canceled their events and programs. The expected loss of revenue from these operations is roughly $824,000 for the period of March through June. The subsequent release of the project part-time and seasonal employees is expected to save $364,000, plus an additional $300,000 savings for the non-personnel expenditures related to the canceled TCSD operations. With the loss of revenue larger than the anticipated savings, additional Measure S funds are necessary to balance the TCSD fund and to provide for higher fund balance in the subsequent year. When building fiscal year 2021 TCSD budget, a major assumption had to be made as to when TCSD would resume their operations. For budgeting purposes, we assumed TCSD operations would be opened in a phased approach beginning in July. Given the state's announcement last Friday, it appears this is likely a valid assumption. However, if the stay-at-home orders are extended beyond July 1st, we will bring forward budget adjustments necessary to remain balanced. For fiscal year 2021, we have nearly $400,000 in fund balance to cover any contingencies, and it should be enough to absorb 2 to 3 months of sustained closures in the event the operations phase in slower than anticipated. Over the next 5 years, TCSD's fund balance should be adequate to guard against fluctuations in revenue and expenditures as facilities open and events and programs come back online. Similar to the general fund, as TCSD revenues return, the reliance on Measure S funds will decrease. I'll turn the presentation back over to Aaron to discuss staffing levels.
As shown earlier, citywide personnel costs are decreasing in response to the pandemic. Authorized staffing levels were reduced by 3.5 full-time positions due to the freezing of vacant positions. In accordance with the MOU, a total of 26 current positions were evaluated by an outside third party, and the majority are recommended for reclassification effective July 1st, the cost of which are included in the departmental budgets. A total of 19 represented positions received the recommendation for reclassification, plus another 4 management confidential positions, and 1 executive level position is recommended to be reclassified from Human Resource Manager to the Director of Human Resources Risk Management position. Public safety, which is provided through contracts with the county and CAL FIRE, are projected to maintain existing staffing levels. We will continue to provide 4 firefighters per engine, as well as meet the 1 per 1,000 law enforcement officer to population ratio. This chart illustrates the authorized headcount over the past 15 years. You can see the peak headcount was nearly 211 positions in 2007-2008. Then it was reduced after the Great Recession. Authorized positions still remain 37.8 positions below the 07-08 level. At this time, I'd like to introduce the city's Director of Public Works and City Engineer, Pat Thomas, who will share the highlights of the fiscal year 21-25 capital improvement program. Pat?
Thank you, Aaron, and good evening, Mayor Pro Tem Edwards and council members. As Aaron mentioned, I'll be providing an overview of our capital improvement program, or CIP budget, for fiscal years 2020-21 through 2024-25. As you know, we prepare a CIP budget that covers a 5-year period of time with the appropriation of funds for the first year and estimates included for the remainder of the 4-year time period. And as, again, Aaron mentioned previously, our CIP budget is still a robust program, even though we have made significant modifications in order to adapt to the revised revenues that are projected now. The total cost of projects included in the CIP program over that 5-year period of time is over $623 million. Of that amount, $514 million are funds that are included in the program, and $109 million are funds that have not been specified at this time that will need to be specified in a future year. And again, as we mentioned, we've made significant modifications and reprioritizations to the CIP program, including, and as an example, the Inez Road widening project has been deferred to the latter part of the 5-year program for construction. We do intend to move forward with the environmental studies that are needed, but the construction of that is deferred to the latter part of the program. We've added 7 new projects to the CIP program for the fiscal year upcoming in 2021. First of those is the Overland Drive widening project. This project is associated with the Overland Bridge over Murrieta Creek, and we plan to widen Overland Drive between Jefferson Avenue and Commerce Center Drive in order to provide that entire width all the way across Murrieta Creek. We've added a project to construct ADA improvements for the West Side Business Park. That includes ADA modifications to the sidewalks and driveways to be compliant with the Act. This is funded using our CDBG allocation of funds for next year. We've added a mini pump track project to construct that, and that's due to the success of the pump track that was constructed at the Ronald Reagan Sports Park. And we've added a project to do a renovation of the Mary Phillips Senior Center utilizing some newly available CDBG funds. We also plan to implement perimeter fencing around the Sam Hicks Monument Park, as well as construct the new playground at Sam Hicks Park this coming year. And the Vine Creek Affordable Housing Project is added to the program using funds available from the SARTA agency. We've also added a project to prepare a local road safety plan using some grant funds that were made available to us for this year from Caltrans. So those are the new projects that are added. The category of projects that we are included in the program, starting with our circulation projects. And next slide, please. Oh, there we go. So the circulation projects included in the 5-year plan total over $506 million. And the highlight of those projects are those that were actually put together based on our Move I-15 task force, and council members Nagar and Ron were integral parts of that task force. And to the credit of that task force, the city was able to obtain a federal grant of $50 million in order to move forward with the I-15 French Valley Parkway Phase 2 project, and we intend to move forward with construction of that project in the 2021 calendar year. We've also got a project to construct auxiliary lanes. We call that the I-15 Congestion Relief Project, included in the program for next year, and again, that was a result of the Move I-15 task force. We've got a project to extend Nicholas Road from its current terminus at Cayugarasal to Butterfield Stage Road, and that project is funded utilizing the Roarpaw Ranch or Somers Bend CFD funds. And we do have a number of pavement rehabilitation projects included in the program, although that program is being curtailed due to the reductions in revenue that we expect that fund our various pavement rehab programs. The infrastructure projects included in the 5-year plan, we've got over $74 million of projects, highlighted by the Margarita Recreation Center. We plan to construct that project using a design-build-delivery method and planning to proceed with the solicitation of bids for that design-build project and start construction in the January of 2021. We are moving forward with plans to renovate the CRC facility, although the funding for construction of that project is one of those that were deferred due to the reductions in revenue. Our parks and recreation projects that are included in the 5-year plan, we've got over $25 million of parks and recreation projects. One of those is to continue with the improvements and renovation at our CRC pool. We'll be adding additional shade structures. However, the addition of that splash pad at that facility is one of those projects that was deferred. We'll be completing the Community Services Master Plan during this upcoming fiscal year and also replacing the control systems at the Eagle Soar splash pad. We will be implementing new playgrounds at 4 additional park sites, continuing with our playground replacement enhancement program. And a lot of that is due to the need for ADA upgrades at those 4 park sites that will be included for this coming year. We've got 2 projects in the program that are funded utilizing the SARTA agency funds. One is the Las Haciendas project that you recently approved the funding for. That's a 77-unit project located in the uptown Temecula area, as well as funding for the Vine Creek project located at Pujol and Main Street, and that's a 60-unit project that there'll be SARTA funds allocated for. So as you can see from the projects noted above, there's expected to be approximately $125 million of investment in our infrastructure in the next few years, which we anticipate will be good measures towards stimulating the local economy. And so at this time, I'd like to turn the presentation back over to City Manager Aaron Adams to conclude the report.
Thank you, Pat. I believe it is important to remind everyone of the resources available and the efforts that are underway for additional relief to assist our local business during these stay-at-home restrictions. The City of Temecula launched Revive, an online consolidated and well-organized list of business and individual recovery resources that can be found at the website. The City Council's approval of the Community Recovery and Reopening Plan and the advocacy letter on May 5th. This was a coordinated effort with Temecula Valley Chamber of Commerce, VTV, Temecula Valley Hospital, and many other stakeholders. This was designed to encourage Riverside County and the Governor's Office that the City of Temecula has thought through a responsible reopening and readiness plan. And then the CARES Act, Phase 3, federal EDA grant. We are pursuing a competitive federal grant between $2 and $3 million for assisting Temecula business with a tourism focus. Riverside County also approved $45 million in grant funding to aid small business enduring hardships due to COVID-19. The program will be administered through the Business and Community Services, formerly County EDA. Temecula businesses will be eligible to receive up to $10,000. The application period opened June 3rd and closes June 19th. To apply, businesses can go to the website that's noted on the slide. Old Town Restaurant expanded footprint and street closure concept, which revolves around the provision of public streets, lots to be afforded to restaurants for dining when they are permitted by the state of California. These expanded dining options likely would be in line with physical distancing and occupancy restrictions. This happens to be the next agenda item on your calendar this evening. Business sustainability. I am very proud to announce that the city also proposed a new business sustainability grant during the budget workshop. Thank you. To assist local businesses who have been impacted by the COVID pandemic. We branded this Temecula Assist, and Lynn earlier in the evening walked you through what a $500,000 investment looks like, and we're pleased that folks are choosing to take advantage of that. We anticipate that after the lottery is done, we can potentially affect and impact 34 or more small businesses, which is pretty substantial, and another 67 with the other half of that grant program. Well, as expected, this year's budget presentation is very different than business as usual. And as we continue to monitor the effects of the pandemic, I'm very proud to be able to present to you tonight, a balanced budget over the 5-year forecast. As Pat described, our CIP is healthy and will continue to provide the needed capital improvement projects within the city. Across the 84 separate projects, it is important for me to mention that 85% of these funds are restricted for use on capital projects, meaning these funds cannot be used to balance the general fund or provide funding for public safety or other community programs. Additionally, with the robust CIP, it is anticipated that roughly $125 million in construction and design work will be infused into our local economy over the next 24 months, providing fuel for our local economic engine. It is also fair to assume that for every $1 million the city invests in construction contracts, it will generate 10 to 15 direct jobs, and depending on the nature of the trade, and additional indirect jobs anywhere from 10 to 20 more. I would be remiss if I did not publicly express my thanks to Jennifer Hennessy, Tricia Hawk, Tina Rivera, Rudy Graciano, and Greg Butler for their tireless work on preparing these budgets and countless hours of work coordinating with departments to make the necessary adjustments since January. And finally, with the ever-changing environment that we are now in, I believe it is prudent to continue to monitor the budgetary impact caused by the pandemic and bring back any budget revisions that may be necessary later in the year. We plan to present a budget revise to the council likely in October, as we will have several months of data by then and will hopefully provide an encouraging update on our operating and our capital budgets. Looking forward, each day seems to bring glimmers of hope as our state and our county move further into reopening phases and orders become more relaxed. Just last week, the state announced that new guidance for reopening the travel and leisure sector is forthcoming, as well as daycares, gyms, activity camps, and wineries. Personally, I want to wish continued good health and blessings to the City Council, to our city employees, and to our residents and businesses. This concludes our presentation, Madam Mayor, and we are available for any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Aaron, and amazing job, staff. And you said something's different. What's different is we've got $33 million in reserve and a balanced budget, and I would venture to guess that not many cities in California, or maybe even in the country, would have, been that frugal. So are there any questions? Nope. Mike? Nothing? Matt?
One quick, so the county earlier this year received funds from the federal government related to COVID expenses. Are we anticipating any support from the county with regard to those, and how does that factor into our budget?
Yeah, the only benefit directly to the city of Temecula or city of Temecula business is the business program that they've adopted, which they've set aside or earmarked $45 million of the $400 million that they got from the feds. And so that's part of the promotion that we're trying to get the word out, and we are getting the word out through the Chamber of Commerce. This is an additional grant program that you should consider pursuing. So that's the only dollars that I'm aware of from Riverside County that will come down.
And is there any anticipation for funds to support, especially the folks with public safety and like Public Works and all that, who've had to sort of respond to this in a different capacity? I know they've talked about that in a number of different ways.
No, actually, folks like us, cities under 500,000, have been left out of the assistance program from the feds or from future CARES Act or the state. So there is an aggressive advocacy and lobbying effort, both at the League of Cities, our own staff, Randy, National League of Cities, and we are aggressively pursuing both revenue recovery and costs associated for our expenses associated with the pandemic, but also just economic losses for cities with populations under 500,000 because they've seen $0 of relief to date. And that's been a huge discrepancy in the national conversation.
Okay, good. And hopefully we can continue that with the county and the federal government as well, because I can't imagine that the $400 and some odd million that the county is, anticipating receiving with regard to that is, covering their direct expenses and perhaps the city of Riverside, but I can't imagine that they've, expended that much in that period of time. So hopefully there's a provision or something soon that carves out support for cities under 500,000. So.
I agree with you. We'll continue to pursue it.
All right, fair enough. Thank you.
So Aaron, along those lines, you know that over the last 6 weeks, a number of leaders from our cities up and down the 15 and then up the 215 to Menifee had a couple of Zoom meetings, and the result of the most recent one was to have a letter drafted to be sent to the county and the state budget, our state and the federal government, admonishing them and requesting that those funds be directed towards cities with fewer than 500,000 people. So, and I said that Temecula would be happy to draft a couple of those letters so that all the leaders from the other cities could join in and sign those letters. And with everything that's happened over the last week, I was remiss, but I have it on my list for you. So it goes right along with what we were talking about. There is a very active movement to try and get those funds. And I don't think Washington made those funds available for counties to hold on to them or states to hold on to them. I think they made them available to get down to local business and support those businesses for expenditures and, and cities as well. So that's all I have. So do we have any public comments? So, and any other comments, council members?
Madam Mayor Pro Tem, I might just mention, just for the public or those that are tuning in, we had a budget workshop 4 weeks ago, where we walked in a publicly noticed Zoom environment and where we walked the city council through everything that you just saw. So I didn't want it to go unsaid that you didn't have any questions or comments, because we've been at this since February and had many opportunities to brief the city council as well.
Yes, thank you for making that point. So this is our second public hearing item, right? So I'm going to open the public hearing, and I already know we don't have any comments, so I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing, and I've already queried my council member colleagues about any comments or questions, so it looks like we're ready to accept a motion.
I'll move the item.
Okay,
Second.
motion and second, and could we have roll call, please?
Mayor Pro Tem Edwards?
Aye.
Councilmember Nagar?
Aye.
Councilmember Ron?
Aye.
Councilmember Schwenk?
Aye.
And that passes unanimously. So, I'm going down my list here to make sure that I haven't missed anything. Yeah, got that. Okay. So we have, you want to read the resolutions or not? Not all of that resolution, no.
No, we're good. We can go ahead and move on to item number 11.
Okay. So item number 11 is provide general direction to staff on proposed temporary expanded dining retail program in Old Town. And could we have a staff report for that? And Old Town is booming, from what I've seen.
Yes, good evening, Madam Mayor Pro Tem, members of the council. As the city manager mentioned, I am here to present a temporary expanded dining retail program for Old Town. in the same vein as the Temecula Assist Grant Program. This is intended to be something to alleviate some of the economic hardships that have taken place over the last 3 to 4 months. And so, why are we here? I think it goes without saying, but just particularly for restaurant and retail, restaurant sales have fallen to the lowest levels in 35 years. 3 decades of restaurant jobs were lost in the last 2 months. On the retail side, sales have dropped, at least 16.4% in April, and we all know about the millions of jobs that have been lost. And particularly on the operations side for restaurants, they've been particularly impacted because of the social distancing requirements, limiting the amount of tables that they can serve. Retail is experiencing the similar type challenges. And strangely enough, because of all this, some of our public right-of-way areas and public parking areas, as well as private parking areas, are temporarily underutilized. And so with these unique circumstances and challenges, we needed to find some unique solutions, and that's what we tried to do. We went through many iterations of what a program like this in Old Town could look like, between full closures to one-way streets to partial closures, and where we landed after working with all of our city departments, including police, fire, public works, the utilities, CR&R, and as well as the restaurants in terms of how deliveries would work. Where we've landed, and I'll be showing an aerial of exactly where the street closures will be. Where we've landed is a limited street closure of portions of Front Street, 4th Street, and 5th Street, and in doing so, allowing the use of sidewalks and the streets for outdoor dining and retail, as well as the use of private property, whether it's parking lots or other private property for the similar uses, dining and retail. This cross-section is to kind of give you a physical awareness of what the proposal looks like. This is Front Street looking north. On your left there is Devilicious. You have the street and the sidewalk. So what we're proposing is the green area would be the expanded dining area. It includes the sidewalk as well as the on-street parking spaces. And this could be, in this particular instance, it's only on one side of the street because there's no development on the other side, but it would be on both sides of the street. And the red area is where the pedestrian paseo, it would basically take the place of the sidewalk, and that's where pedestrians would move up and down the closed portions of the street. And it would also serve as emergency access and loading and unloading areas for the businesses. So of course we need to do some outreach. We've been kicking around this idea for a grand total of 3 weeks, but we wanted to get to the business owners, the property owners, the restaurant owners in Old Town, to find out what would actually work for them. We didn't want to engage in anything that actually wouldn't be valuable to them. So along with numerous personal one-on-one conversations with folks in Old Town, I did attend a meeting of probably 60 to 70 different property owners, business owners, restaurant owners in Old Town. It was a lively meeting, but at the end of the meeting, I asked if for a show of hands, if who would be interested in a program like this, and I didn't see one hand not go up. So that was a good sign. We've also been engaging the OTTA. Emily Filippino over at the Chamber of Commerce has helped me out with getting the message over to them. Overwhelmingly positive as of today. And then we had an Old Town Steering Committee meeting on May 29th, where we presented this to the committee, and we had 14 comments submitted from Chamber of Commerce representatives, businesses in Old Town, restaurants in Old Town, and they were all positive and supportive comments. So particularly the feedback that we have been getting is that the restaurants and the retail need as much space as possible. Just the sidewalk or just the on-street parking spaces wouldn't be enough. They don't even think, for the most part, with the sidewalk and the on-street parking, that they'll actually be able to achieve 100% occupancy. So the more we can give them, the better. And another issue with that led us to partial street closures instead of allowing vehicular traffic to remain in all areas is the barriers that would need to be constructed around the seating areas, if their vehicular traffic was allowed, would have to be crash resistant at least, and that would be cost prohibitive and time prohibitive for the restaurants. In terms of parking, the proposal is that we'll probably lose about 150 to 200 spaces on street, on the closed streets. But we're also proposing to utilize some of the city's vacant property in Old Town to have temporary parking lots. We think we can pick up about 90 spaces there. It's not a one-for-one match, but it's definitely eating into that loss of spaces. And one particular thing to note about this proposal that we're bringing forward tonight is that, and it's an important point, is that all city-owned parking lots and all private parking lots will still be accessible. So you can drive to Old Town and you'll still be able to access every single parking lot in Old Town by car. So nothing's being cut off. In terms of process, we want to make this as quick and easy as possible. So we're proposing to use a special event permit for public property. That type of permit is geared towards the use of public property. And if you want to use private property, it's a temporary use permit. Proposing an over-the-counter, same-day, no-fee review. The requirements of the application are going to be very minimal. The only caveat there is that we can do it in one day so long as the application is complete. And the caveat too is that each applicant, restaurant applicant, will still need to provide clearance from ABC. ABC has created new allowances for this type of situation that will allow them to get, basically it's a catering permit. But they'll still need to get that clearance. In terms of timing, I know we met with the subcommittee. Their direction was to do it as fast as possible. We're actually going to recommend that we would actually close the street next Wednesday, June 17th. That would give us time starting tomorrow, if the council sees fit, to start taking applications. There's going to be a little bit of time to take applications and get everybody squared away. We're getting close to the weekend rush. Not necessarily want to interfere with that. We can get everything set up. Businesses can be prepared and know that next Wednesday the street will be closed and they can get out there and start erecting their outdoor patios. And in terms of how long this will last, we're proposing that it stays closed until social distancing orders end. And the 100% occupancy can be achieved in their current facilities, or businesses no longer find the program useful, or there is a threat to public health and safety. In terms of cost, there are some costs to this, the startup costs and ongoing costs. The first month's cost, which include procuring the water barriers to close the streets, signage hardware, and some equipment to move some of the K-rail around. The first month cost is about $7,300, and then ongoing cost is $3,000, which is the cost for the monthly rental of the water barricades. So at this time, I'm going to show you the actual street closure plan. So let me orient you. This is an aerial of Old Town. Down here at the bottom, this is First Street. So Front Street is this street running along here. This is Mercedes Street. The colors, the blue color is the streets that will remain open. Mm-hmm. Including the purple color, that represents 2 alleys that are going to remain open. So the purple and the blue are streets that remain open. The black lines are the streets that are proposed to be closed. The red outlined areas are city parking lots, mm-hmm. and the yellow outlined areas are private parking lots. So just to show you, if you come in from the south of Old Town, you can come in, you can access the city's, this is the Stampede here, we call it the Stampede parking lot. You can access that, or you can go around to Mercedes, and you can bypass Old Town altogether, as you can now. Or you can turn on 3rd Street and come along 3rd Street. You can cross over. It will be open for east-west on 3rd Street, so folks that live in these buildings can access their house. Main Street will remain open. This is the alley between 4th and 5th Street. That will remain open, as well as the alley between 5th and 6th. And the reason those alleys remain open is that it allows for exit out of Old Town, as well as access to the parking lots here at Mad Madeline's and Texas Lil's. And this alley remains open, so you can access the parking lot here for these businesses. The closures themselves, as you can see in black, are on Front Street from 2nd to 3rd. Again, 3rd will be open, from 3rd to Main Street, from Main Street up to the alley. It'll be closed there to allow access through the alley, and then across to this location here, as well as 5th and 4th Streets will be closed. That's where we have primarily the most restaurants. It's the biggest bang for our buck, with allowing for the most circulation to continue as possible. So with that, staff is recommending to bring forward the Old Town Steering Committee's recommendation to move forward with the proposal, as well as direction to go ahead and implement the proposed plan. That concludes my presentation. I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, Luke. Does anybody have any questions? Matt?
The 90 additional spots, where?
The 2 spots out in front of City Hall, the 2 vacant parcels out in front of City
Okay.
Hall.
And then this might be more a public works question or not, but if we're anticipating use of the sidewalks and all of that, only concern I have is we've put a lot of effort into putting in new sidewalks. And I'd imagine a lot of the infrastructure that would go down, tables and umbrellas or whatever it is, might not be 100% compatible with those sidewalks. So I'd just be concerned about, a lot of movement of chairs and scratching up all of the surfaces that are out there now. Any thoughts on that?
Well, as you know, we've replaced all the wood boardwalks with stamped concrete now, and it's very durable. So, we wouldn't expect there to be any significant damage. If we need to do some additional cleaning of the sidewalks, we can do that, but I wouldn't expect there would be any permanent damage that would take place as a result of that.
Can we just maybe reach out to the folks who are gonna do that, and maybe in this application process might be a good place to do that, to see if they could have something, on the base of the tables, the umbrella stands or something that would be non-scratching and non-abrasive, or, whether, I don't, I'm not gonna try and figure that out here, but,
Yeah.
just to try and mitigate that as much as possible.
We can certainly make that part of the material that we provide for the businesses.
And the license agreement also, just in the event that they do actually do some serious damage, that they're responsible for any repairs that need to take place.
Okay. That was it.
Anybody else? Mike? Zach?
No questions?
We've talked about, we and many other people over the years have talked about closing down Front Street and putting in, expanding the farmer's market or doing, craft fairs or things like that. Has any of that been considered as long as we're closing?
That's not considered along with this proposal particularly. I know that at the steering committee meeting, I know Director Hawkins was there and Aaron was there. And, obviously, this idea leads to further ideas, and the discussion of different events that could take place was discussed, and it was discussed in a positive light, as this may be a pilot program to take a look and see how it all works, and if that's going to be something that is viable in the future.
And we've wanted to have maybe another farmer's market on the south end of town, so this might be the ideal time to do a test flight for that. Okay, and no questions, any comments? Nope, then I'm ready for a motion.
I'll move it.
Actually, we have comments on this one.
Oh, sorry. Okay,
So,
go ahead, Randy.
we have 4 comments on this one. I'll go ahead and just read those into the record now. The first speaker is Al Rubio. The economic impacts of COVID-19 on our local restaurant community and our local business districts has been devastating. Business owners have been forced, limiting the scope and service of their operation. They've had to lay off staff, they've endured increasing costs due to the supply chain issues, and they've incurred more costs in an effort to invest in hygiene, sanitation, and risk mitigation efforts to comply with state and county mandatory guidelines. The state's approval to reopen dine-in services at restaurants is exciting news, but it leaves restaurateurs with increasing costs and a limitation to how much revenue they can generate out of limited dining space. The City of Temecula's proposal to temporarily provide Old Town Temecula restaurants with outdoor space so that the restaurants can expand their dining areas is good. I fully support this effort because it makes operating a business a bit more feasible, serves more patrons within our community, and creatively protects the interests of public health considerations with economic progress. That said, I believe this proposal will promote a fun and pleasant dining experience. We encourage you to give Old Town Temecula businesses this opportunity. The next speaker is Kim Kelleher. As a member of Temecula Valley Chamber of Commerce's Board of Directors and the founder of a tourism-related business in Temecula, I would like to support the city's effort to provide Old Town Temecula restaurants with additional outdoor space or expanding their dining areas. I see this as a creative solution to help struggling restaurants in a time of dire need. They have suffered enough, and it is time to do everything we can to support the hardworking entrepreneurs of Old Town. Temporary outdoor dining is a solution that is working well in other areas, such as Long Beach and Santa Barbara, and I personally think it is a worthwhile experiment to see if a walking district in Old Town might be preferable to drive-through access at some point in the future. Thank you for thinking outside the box during this difficult time for small businesses and supporting Old Town restaurateurs. The next speaker is Sharice Manning. In this time of economic uncertainty, it is imperative that businesses and government think outside of the box in creative ways to increase revenue and balance public safety. The City of Temecula's proposal to temporarily provide Old Town Temecula restaurants with outdoor space so that the restaurants can expand their dining area is an example of forward thinking. This model has been successful in other communities, and I fully support this effort because it makes operating a business a bit more feasible, serves more patrons within our community, and creatively protects the interests of public health considerations with economic progress. I encourage you to give Old Town Temecula businesses this opportunity. And the last speaker is Brian Connors. My name is Brian Connors, and I currently serve as the past chair of the Temecula Valley Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors. Please accept this note as my support for the temporary expanded space for Old Town businesses to effectively operate and garner critically needed business. When the citizens of this great country, region, and city are in the hour of need, this can be one example of how we can become united to overcome the greatest of challenges. And that concludes public comments.
Thank you, Randy. Okay, so no comments, no questions, so I'm ready for a motion.
I'll move the item.
Second.
Motion and a second, and can we have roll call, please?
Mayor Pro Tem Edwards,
Aye.
Councilmember Nagar,
Aye.
Councilmember Ron,
Aye.
Councilmember Schwank.
Aye.
All right, unanimous. So moving on, we have commission reports. How are we going to handle commission reports? I see some scattered commissioners.
Mayor Pro Tem Edwards, they will come up to the podium and provide a presentation or comments.
All right. So first I've got the public safety, well, commission reports, and let me see, does it tell me? Community service. She's got you in a particular order, so.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, council members, and staff. Last night, we had our first meeting since March, and it was our first Zoom meeting. It was a very positive experience for all. We heard updates from staff regarding the thoughtful, innovative, and amazing things that Community Services has been doing. Despite canceled events and limited access, to name a few challenges, our Community Services team, led by Director Hawkins, has done an outstanding job. They've offered new content and made the most of limited resources, even supplementing our park rangers with a couple staff on a couple occasions. They've listened, they've pivoted, they've adjusted, and delivered the Temecula way. Lastly, we were able to finally complete our elections, and Adam Ruiz was named our vice chair, and myself, I was named chair.
Congratulations.
That concludes my report.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we're going on to planning.
There's me. Mr. Butler, our
I
new
am
Director of Public
I
Health.
see Linnaeus
Yes,
out
that's
there.
it.
He's
There we
the,
go.
he's the sterilizer.
So happy about that. Thank you. Well, I'm happy to be here tonight and not on a Zoom meeting. So excited about that. And planning we've only canceled, I think, one meeting. We've had all of our meetings. So appreciate planning and all that they've done to continue on during this time. And I wanted to highlight 3 things that we voted on as a planning commission. The first thing was the Be Good restaurant that has taken the spot for Rosa's. So we're hoping that they can be successful there. And the second is the Stone Church Brewery, which is right next door. And I was particularly impressed with this owner and his responsibility as a brewery owner in our city. And number 3, which I think is exciting, is Antica Italia, which will be right off of Front Street, and it's the owner of Gourmet Italia. So
Good.
we know how good that is. So anyway, excited about those 3 in particular that we voted on. I'd like to thank staff and city council during these last 3 months in particular. I know that kind of like the duck under the water, you guys have been doing a lot that the community is not probably aware of, and I'm not probably fully aware of. And so I want to thank you for that. This has been a tough 3 months and a solemn 2 weeks. And I personally appreciate each one of your city council reports tonight, and I hope that the city is listening. I've been concerned about our city and the future, and wanting for it to continue to be a great city that it has been, and to improve where we can. So I'm grateful for your reports tonight. I think that's a step in the right direction for us as a city. So thank you, and let's all work together as leaders in this city for right and for good. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Lene. And public traffic, safety. Mr. Sterilizer's coming through first. There, thank you.
There you go. Two when I'm done. Hi, it's great to be back with all of you, and again, my appreciation as well for the way the city has been managed during this pandemic. Just incredible. The services that continued, the availability, unbelievable. I didn't know how it would turn out, and very proud. Also, a lot of respect for how you're handling the injustice issues here, and the sensitivity and the willingness to meet and hear. That's very pleasing to the heart. We've been meeting by Zoom, and we had a presentation at our last council meeting. I believe her name was Angie Kellogg. She's with a program that follows up after the accident at the high schools with the drunk drivers.
Oh.
And what this
Every 15 minutes?
Every 15 minutes. And what this program does is it goes to the next step. And they work with local district attorneys, police forces, and the judges. And they actually bring a case to the school. And it's a real case. It's a real driver that's been tagged for DUI. It's a real judge, prosecuting attorney, defense attorneys, and the sentence is real. So if the sentence is jail, the students watch that person go out in handcuffs. Now, obviously, the person has agreed to do this at the school, but it's a great program, and I share it with you because it's something you may want to hear and see like we did, because I think it'd be a great addition for our schools. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Okay, city manager report? Or I've got, public safety first, sorry.
Yes, we have a fire report today.
All righty.
I just wanted to see Greg get up there and clean up again.
He's busy tonight. Are you using the same one over and over again? Oh, good, okay, just checking.
Thank you, sir, for keeping me safe.
Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, council members, and staff. I'm here to present the fire department staff for the month of May 2020. Fire Chief John Crater, newly appointed 4 weeks ago, and I truly, sincerely thank you guys for bringing me into your city and allowing me to be your fire chief. I want to thank you for your service. I want to thank you for your dedication. I want to thank you for your support. 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 I want to In the month of May, we ran 599 calls. That's down a little bit from last year due to the stay-at-home orders and COVID. I expect those call volumes to go up. Last year, we're probably about 150 more than this time this year. Next slide. You can see a map of the city where all the calls are located. Year to date, we've ran 3,443 calls in the city of Temecula. Next slide. As far as our planning, review, and inspections go in the city, we've continued that. With COVID-19, it brought some challenges, though, with social distancing and entering businesses. The one thing that it did allow us to do this year is we could proudly say that we've completed all state-mandated inspections within the city, and no one else has done that in the county. So I'm very proud of our staff to get those completed, and we used the time that we had to, the extra time we had with the COVID issues to get those done. So we were able to shift our focus. Next slide, please. Also within the city, even though we've been in this pandemic, our firefighters have been out in the community doing birthday drive-bys. It's really gained traction. The kids love to see us. We don't get out of the engines. We simply drive by, toot the siren, and tell them, happy birthday. This is also good for the mental health of our firefighters, not being stuck in the station, quarantined all the time, and only responding to emergencies. So it kind of breaks things up and gives them something to take their mind off of just COVID-19. And in the community, it's been well receptive, and we've had a good time doing it. So we hope to continue doing that, and that concludes my report. Do you have any questions?
Questions? None? Great report. I love the outreach.
Thank you.
So thank you. Okay, so now, City Manager?
Yes, just one item, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. To the City Council, I did also appreciate all the remarks during City Council reports, and over the last 3 hours, I've been processing in my head sort of, before you leave the chambers tonight, sort of what I'm going to do with that. So I figured I'd use this opportunity to just make sure I heard everybody correctly, and I did take notes, and I will take your notes, and I'll take your notes as well that you read when time permits. But I don't foresee a way around sort of not compiling all of this into some organized fashion with recommendations, and then when ready, bring it back to this board in the near term for council discussion, absent subcommittee work and things of that nature. So I'm planning to kind of proceed in that manner if everyone is comfortable with that. So
Yes, thank you.
okay, thank you.
You're welcome. City Attorney report, anything, Peter?
I have nothing tonight, Madam Mayor Pro Tem.
All right, thank you. So as we adjourn, I would like to adjourn in the memory of George Floyd. A horrible, horrible, needless death. And it seems to be, and I pray that it will continue to be, a catalyst for change across the entire country, so that death will not be in vain, and our hearts go out to his family. So I'll take a motion to adjourn in the name of George Floyd.
Second.
Thank you. We're adjourned.